Not gonna lie, trouble slays. It just always does, and it always will. How you doing, Vish? Good to see you.
Yeah. Well, if I answer that question honestly, it's going to bring the whole vibe of the room down.
Oh,
So I'm at least happy to be here.
me too. Me too. I am at least happy to be here. And I'm happy to see a bunch of friends here. We have a bunch of friends here, Vish. Hypatia's
Excellent.
here, Jackie's here, Marcos Malos is here, Tomer is here, but I mean, of course,
Hanging in
because he's always here. Big Zebra's here.
very late.
Michael Beverly's here. Look, Apologia popped in. Not sure if you're still here, buddy, but it's good to see you. Look, oh, there's a pile of people here, and I am excited and I'm happy that you guys are. Hank Fishy, sorry, I have to say it because Hank Fishy is one of my long suffering patrons and has been a patron for like since the start, and it's good to see you. It's always good to see you. This guy likes to follow me around like a lost puppy dog for some reason. I don't know what his deal is, but he's here too. So yeah, gang's here, everyone. How are we? Well, would Vish and I answer that question? I guess you guys can answer that question in the chat. Um, It's Tuesday, the 10th of December. My name is Kip Davis. I'm a biblical scholar and a specialist in early Judaism and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you've never been here before, uh, this is what it looks like. This is my very capable and talented producer, Vishanti. She helps me out. We try to do this together and to make it
Very
as
professional operation.
a very, very professional operation. I will have you all know. So it's nice to see Maya Atkinson here. Good to see Maya. And
Josh Bowen's in the chat.
Triceratops. I know, I saw that guy. So
Mhm.
yeah. How about that? So
And all the folks that are coming over from Dr. Bird's stream.
yes. Thanks everyone for sliding over here. I haven't talked to Jen for a little while. So but I was over there a little bit earlier today. She had mutual friend and fellow Diablo critic Dan McClellan on. And they were talking about books. Books are fun. I have a few on my desk that we're going to look at today at various points, and on my computer screen, because that's how we do this kind of stuff these days. So just to give everyone, I think everyone, well, you should know, people should know kind of what's going on today, but I will review what's happening just in case you've been living under a rock. So a few weeks ago now, maybe, I think it was probably closer to the beginning of the November, a Christian apologist and PhD student at the University of Toronto in this nation's largest city he did a live, not a live, he did a pre-recorded video debate with Billy Carson, the famous pseudo historian grifter, and they did it over on a channel owned by Mark Minode, I believe is his name. He's an entrepreneur and a businessman who runs a podcast. They ended up on this interview together. So I found out about it very shortly after it happened, directly from Wes. Wes Huff is he's a friend. He and I have kind of recently been in touch. He actually reached out to me a number of months back. I think it was in September or October, to talk about a possible opportunity he had to appear on the Danny Jones podcast and he knew that I had done some stuff with Danny Jones, and he knew about the stuff that I had done on Ammon Hillman. So he reached out. At first, we talked, we chat periodically now via text. So we're friends, right? So he told me about this debate that went down shortly after it happened. He told me about the fallout of this debate and the desperation in which one Mr. Billy Carson engaged in order to ensure that nobody ever saw this debate. And he started leaking clips from it. Well, I don't know if he started showing a couple of clips on it last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, and even prior to that, and in the weeks since, we've seen a lot of leaked footage of this debate, and there's been an onslaught of response in Christian apologetic spaces. And this in large part because Wes works for an apologetics ministry, Apologetics Canada, and he runs a pretty big YouTube channel where he does apologetics and biblical scholarship. He made a really slick production short film about manuscripts in Egypt. And so this has gained a ton of traction in apologetic spaces. There've been responses and videos from many of the prominent apologists on YouTube. What do you meme? I think I looked today. His video featuring this debate has over 1 million views at this point. I Vocab Malone did something about it. Wes was on live with Insipid Theosophy last night, or sorry, I got that wrong. It's Insipid Sophistry last night, and I just literally a few hours ago, Wes was on again with Cameron Bertuzzi from Capturing Christianity. So, but I seriously thought, with the amount of traction that this has been getting in apologetic spaces, it felt kind of incumbent for a critical scholar to do the unusual thing here and to provide some sort of response to anything that Billy Carson is involved with. So I just want everybody to be clear that that's what I'm doing here. Um, I when I in the course of my conversations with Wes, I mentioned to him that I wanted to do this this week, and he, prior to him actually publishing the full debate, and the full debate is now published on his channel, and I encourage people to watch it. But just prior to publishing the full debate, he actually just gave me a copy of it and told me that I was free to use it. So he knows that this is happening this afternoon. And actually, Wes, if you happen to be in the chat, please make sure you say hi. Let us know that you're kicking around. And I want people to know too. So this is it, it's a strange sort of situation. I think it's true. It's maybe a little messy. Maybe it's a little messy.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, right? Billy Carson is a grifter, and he's a pseudo historian. He
Your
promotes,
first clue is he's sitting in front of the flower of life,
right, and
which is
in
just
this
mystic
this
quackery. So
outrageous, hilariously stupid stream that he put on a couple of nights ago. He makes the claim that is God that he has looking over his shoulder in the background. So
okay.
I mean, these are the kind of people we're dealing with here, right? Now, on the other side of this, though, is Wes. Wes is a PhD student at the University of Toronto. He's entering his final year of PhD work, which means that he's going to be submitting his dissertation before the summer, I believe, is what he told me. He'd like to get it done here in the spring. So Wes is qualified. Like he has done the work. He is in one of the best doctoral programs in this country, in the Ancient Near Eastern, the Department of Ancient Near Eastern Studies at the University of Toronto. So I mean, I absolutely feel it's necessary to honor that and to point that out, that that Wes, and I'm sorry if I don't know if Wes has published anything yet, but I expect that if he hasn't, that's coming shortly. So you know, Wes is certainly a budding scholar, if not, you know, a scholar in fact already. So now the awkward part of this is that he is also still a Christian apologist who also still engages in Christian apologetics and the sorts of tropes and maybe the sorts of informational tactics that you see from many Christian apologists when it comes to discussing the biblical text and discussing matters of history. So right off, I just want to say I think it's important to provide a critical view of what happened here, because as much as I was cheering, as much as I have been cheering Wes on in this noble endeavor to confront the misinformation of Billy Carson, I think it's also important to point out that many of the things that Wes does say in this discussion do require some critical reflection. We do need to talk about critical scholarship with regards to some of the things in this exchange that they had. So if you're here, Wes, when you're here, I just I want to point out, I'm trying to be respectful. I'm trying to be fair in what I'm going to do here today. And because it was you know, the exchange itself, and we're not going to go through the whole thing, but there's a lot there, and I've clipped it down from its original. I think it's about an hour and 40 minutes of actual content. I think I've cut it down to about an hour, about 60 minutes, and I don't know if we'll watch all of it, but I certainly would like to try to get into all of it today. If you guys have questions or comments or anything, there's a lot of people here today. So if you guys have questions or comments or anything pressing, the best way, Vishanti's going to try and watch the chat, but she's doing 6 things at once. But yes, please super chat for priority. It certainly helps both of us out as well. So I think maybe we just start, unless you have anything that you wanna add before we begin here, Vish.
Nope.
Okay. So the first place we're gonna begin, though, I did want to show this bit that I clipped from Billy's live stream from 2 nights ago. This was really just a gripe fest. This was a 3.5 hour video of pure cope from Billy Carson about how unfairly he has been treated. Poor wealthy privileged Billy Carson has been so poorly treated by these people on the other side of the debate table from him. So but this is just the kind of guy that we're dealing with here, and there's some funny stuff. I thought we should maybe look at this first in our introduction to Wes Huff, and in our introduction to this debate discussion.
Defendant number 2.
Oh, by the way, so pause that for a second.
Okay.
That's so defendant number 2. So Billy Carson has actually sent cease and desist letters to everybody that he believes was involved in. It's good to see you here, Wes. I hope this is good. All right. And I just want to say thanks again for helping me out and for allowing me to do this, and for providing me a good quality video that I can work through. All right. So uh, Billy Carson has named 4 defendants in a lawsuit that he intends to file. Wes has been identified as defendant number 2. Now, because Wes is Canadian, living on the right side of the border here, he this does complicate things a fair bit, and as a result, there's some pretty funny stuff, I have to say, that comes out in this here. All right, let it go, Vish.
A person that's heavily involved in the super left NDP.
Let's stop there, shall we?
Zealots.
And honestly, I don't know Wes's politics. I don't want to know Wes's politics. This is just not something that we in this country tend to discuss very openly. It's still pretty private here on how people think and how they vote. But just to give people an idea of what Billy Carson just said, the NDP is the new Democratic Party here in this country. The NDP is on the this is our left side, full-blown European style socialist political party in this country. So for those of y'all living in the US, this is the communism you hear your leaders complaining about on a regular basis. Now, I don't care at all what Wes's politics are, but I am just going to say that this was a surprising suggestion on the part of Billy Carson. Just on the basis of some of the kind of public content that Wes has produced, and to be clear, I'm it doesn't matter to me what your politics are. It seems to matter to Billy Carson, but I don't know. When I watched this right away, I thought this was hilarious. Wes, I hope you found this as funny as I did. But yeah, let's see what else Billy has to say here.
A lot of them are with the University of Ontario, so which we've already been in talks with the University of Ontario.
Pause it there.
And they're heavily involved in bribes.
So now, the University of Ontario is not an institution that exists anywhere, as far as I'm aware. And it's a surprise to learn that Billy Carson has been in touch with people at this completely fictional institution. Just to be clear, Wes is in good standing at the University of Toronto. There we go. Wes is neither part of nor has he ever voted for the NDP. So, and any of you living in this country, I'm sure you're laughing your asses off right now at this kind of nonsense. So, no University of Ontario. Whoever Billy was speaking to, it wasn't the University of Ontario, and probably more importantly, it wasn't anybody at the University of Toronto, which happens to be probably one of the best universities in this country, where Wes currently attends and is working on his on completing his doctorate degree. All right, let's continue.
For false information and doing a lot of what you would call research. If somebody has real knowledge, if their word is so powerful, if their holy words that they know and all their history that they supposedly know is so incredible and so true, why they got to do all this for little old Billy Carson? Why they got to come for little old Billy Carson right? Why is that? It seems as if they just don't have the power they thought they had, right? So we're heavily involved in a lot of research, along with sharing information with different parties, different organizations. One is the RCMP, that's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Through them, we were able to get connected with the VDP, the Vancouver Police Department, also the CFSEU, which they then linked us there in a conference call. So we're dealing with the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit, and they're involved in a lot of organized gang-related crime. That's what they're involved in. And why is it gang-related? Because in America, this would be called a RICO. When you put a group of people together and you begin to organize and you conspire to attack through cyber attacks, through physical attack, through threats, and you also you create this environment for negativity. You create this environment for potential threat of life. You create this environment for zealots to feel that they're now empowered to injure, potential injury, and things like that, or to disrupt business. That's a RICO. But they have something different in Canada for that, as we were told now through the attorneys and the talks we've had so far. And also the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, the CAFC. Cybercrime involves fraud, phishing, and other online fraud, including scams. And one of the scams is contacting people and paying bribes, offering bribes, which has happened, to get them to give an alternative view or a different opinion about forbidden knowledge or Billy Carson.
I gotta say, that all sounds pretty damn serious. By the way, I just want to point out as well, Apologia says he has voted for at least 5 different political parties here in Canada, and I think, I don't know if I voted for 5, but it's pretty close to that. Maybe 4, maybe 5. I don't know. I have to say, because it's weird too when you think about the difference between provincial and federal parties, at least certainly in British Columbia, because British Columbia is like its own thing. But my God, Wes, what the hell did you do? That sounds bad. Like, that all sounds really bad. Gang related activities, a RICO case. And how on earth did Billy Carson come to think that he should contact the Vancouver Police Department? I'm hoping, I understand that geography can be, Canadian geography especially, can be very challenging for my American friends. But guys, please tell me that most of you understand that Vancouver is about as far away from Toronto as Detroit is from Los Angeles. Is that a known thing? Vishanti, is this something that people should know?
I don't care about Canadian politics. Just saying. None of this is relevant to me. This is inside baseball. Like, my eyes are glazing over when you're talking about all this, because I don't have any real reference for this. Okay. So I know that, like, you and Wes are from Canada, but I'm also like, look, Billy has a persecution complex. He can dish it out, but he can't take it. So
this is abundantly clear. Yes, but you know where Vancouver is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know where Toronto is?
Yes, far away from Vancouver.
Yes. So, seriously, Billy, what are you doing? Contacting the Vancouver police. I don't think they're going to be able to help you. So Michael's telling you that I have to get back on track here. I'm sorry, guys. I just thought it was funny. But yeah, so well, as we start here, let's pull up the video now, and I'll say one more, like, the other thing I'm going to say before we start here, the persecution complex that Billy has developed is against clearly what he sees as this vast religious empire of zealots. And I think he's gained that impression on the basis of the reaction that he's seen on YouTube over the past few weeks of all these Christian apologetics channels jumping on this and absolutely dunking on him for saying a whole bunch of stupid things in his video, in this video that we're going to watch. So I just want to point out to Billy or to anyone else watching this that I am absolutely not. I am not part of any sort of zealots network. And that's a big part of why I thought this was an important stream to do. All right. Yeah. So we're going to watch.
Right. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping things. If you have a wrench, you better start moderating this chat. Using it. And there's a lot of people that aren't reading the scrolling banner at the bottom of the screen that says chat guidelines. No proselytizing. That includes for or against religions. No trolling, no esoteric quackery. And there's already some people starting to misbehave, so the ban hammer will come down. Just letting y'all know. All right.
Vishanti is merciless with the ban hammer, guys. And just before we push play, I'm gonna read this super chat. Wes is in the West Side Gang. It's pretty great, Bennis, the Menace Pod. Thank you very much for that. All right, so let's start with this and see what happened.
What you hugely specialize in as well, you just came back from Egypt, is like the Emerald tablets. You've been studying those since what, you were like 6 or something?
No, not the Emerald tablets.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, the Emerald tablets I've been studying for the last probably 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah, but since I was 6, I was studying aerospace technology, which then led me into understanding more about advanced technologies and then finding the link between advanced technology and ancient civilizations. And going on literally a 25-year, or 27-year now, goodness, trek around the world. Been around the world now over 18 times. Last year, spent 9 months in hotels.
I remember.
As you know, you're my witness, leaving this big old mansion behind and not going home at all. And
grind,
traveling nonstop to these ancient sites to get the information hands-on.
All right, just
Wesley Huff, historian,
second, maybe. I just want to point out, boy, Billy sure does like to talk about his big house a lot. So one of the things I wanted to point out at the outset here is that you do not become a specialist in antiquity, ancient cultures, ancient literatures, ancient religions by getting on a plane and flying around the world. And I get it. Yes, you talk to people from different cultures. You go and you look at artifacts that are on display in museums. You can read books. You engage maybe even with actual experts on these fields. But this on its own, all of these good things on their own do not qualify you. They do not qualify anyone to undertake the rigor of examining ancient history and ancient cultures, ancient religions, and ancient languages. I think that's important to point out. So, Billy, that's great. It's great that Billy Carson is traveling the world and enriching himself with these cross-cultural experiences. But this does nothing. This speaks not a whit to his ability to navigate texts, history, and cultures or religions. All right, let's get
linguist, biblical scholar, Ph.D, and athlete wannabe. I like how you threw that in the bio right there. And Wesley, my man, I think it would be great to. I know you guys were both recently in Egypt. There's tons that I'm interested in. That how all these things show up in Egypt is baffling to me. But just going right to it, I had here. Billy, you talk about how Jesus was never crucified.
Hold on a second, Vish.
Which is interesting.
For a sec. So I'll point out on the other side of this, Wes has done some traveling to Egypt. I mentioned he filmed. It's a really good looking short documentary about biblical manuscripts that he filmed in Egypt. The difference between Wes going to Egypt and making this documentary, and Billy Carson going to Egypt and doing whatever he chooses to do while he's there, is that Wes actually knows things. Wes actually has methodological training in, at the graduate level, and now the post, the doctoral level, in relevant fields, which allow him to correctly, accurately analyze and assess stuff that he's looking at. He'll know better where to investigate and what to investigate and why, with the skills that he's gained in his education. It's important, y'all.
Because my wife, who's a Muslim, they believe that as well. Their beliefs, from what I understand from her, are they don't think that Jesus, as they believe is a prophet, God would have him killed. But I don't think they have any historical evidence, as far as I know, as to what or how or why they believe that. I'm curious for you guys both, and if you want to, I guess, go first, Billy, as to how you came about like the findings where it seems that Jesus was not crucified, or that's not accurate.
Sure. And in my videos, and if you listen to the podcast, the statement is according to the Sinai Bible. Okay, according to the Sinai Bible, Jesus wasn't crucified in that Bible. That Bible predates the King James
I've
Version
seen
of the
this
Bible.
clip.
And the text there actually is about 12 to 14,000 differences between the Sinai Bible and the King James Version of the Bible, which came much later. And then also one of the things that were interesting is that they discovered the book of Jesus' wife, which is at the Harvard Seminary, which according to some scholars, that's a little controversial, but they claim that this is an accurate record that Jesus may have even been married, which then, adds more, if that's true, it adds more to, the hypothesis that maybe he wasn't crucified. I just personally believe that Jesus was an amazing human being. I don't think that he was the Son of God in the sense that he's God, but that we're all gods. As he said, ye are gods, and that we're to do greater things in him. And I just personally believe that the return of the Christ is the return of the Christ consciousness. When we can all achieve a certain level of knowledge, wisdom, passion, understanding, empathy, love that he came to this planet with, and we get that in our mind and our conscience, and we can act on those incredible emotions and that understanding, that the whole world's going to transform instantaneously.
All right.
I had to stop it there because I think Wes's facial expression is very much. I know exactly what he's thinking in that moment, and I feel that. I just want to give
listen. And if you're still here, Wes, I think. I was impressed by a few things, but one of the things that I was like mega impressed by is the composure.
Just keeping it together.
Just keeping it together through this whole thing. And I think, it is an excellent visual here, Vish, where it kind of looks like Wes is just about to leap out
trying to keep
behind
it in.
his eyes, right? And well done.
So
buddy.
We have a super chat for Satan 616.
Thank you, Satan.
Knows as much real history as Richard Carrier knows about heavenly sperm banks.
Some might say that Richard Carrier is the expert on heavenly sperm banks.
Sperm banks.
It may be. I don't know. But thank you very much, Satan, for the super chat. It's good to see you. Okay, so what's the timestamp there, Vish? Is that the did we do
3:42?
Okay, yeah. Let's let it go for a bit here.
And I think at the second coming is the coming of the Christ consciousness to the planet, not a human being flying back to Earth to save people. That's just my personal understanding of how I've perceived it over many, many years of going through this information and going through all this text.
All right. I think let's pause there. And Wes does a very good job, I think, at this point of pulling out exactly and teasing out exactly what's wrong and what's going on here. Billy Carson is talking about the Sinai Bible is Codex Sinaiticus, which is it's one of the two. It might be. I don't know how scholars feel about the comparative dating between Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, but it's certainly one of the two oldest complete manuscripts of the New Testament. It's a very, very, very important manuscript of the New Testament, and just about everything that Billy Carson said there about it is utter nonsense, as we're going to discover here when Wes replies.
Go ahead on for what Billy was talking about, I think with a book in the Harvard Museum, and I heard something about Jesus's wife, which that's, yeah.
Yeah, well, first let me say, I think it's really cool to not just be in the room proverbially with you, Billy, but be able to interact with you, because I wish I could be there in person. Unfortunately, Toronto, Canada is a long way away from Florida. It's a little bit of a jaunt, but I really appreciate the
It might be closer to Florida than Vancouver,
though. Have investigated to a certain degree
Yes.
some of these facts. Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
When you say the Sinai Bible, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the biblical text that was written. It made it into you can actually look it up on Amazon. It's a Bible called, I have a version at home. It's called the Sinai Bible, right, from Mount Sinai. I'm assuming it's the mountain that they're referencing there. But they put together their own version of the biblical text prior to the King James Version being put out.
Sure. So when you refer to the Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus? Like the codex that comes? Okay. That's why I was trying to get some clarification, because so you can actually go and see Codex Sinaiticus is at the British Library. So you can go and see it. It's on display. And the British Library has actually digitized the entire manuscript. So I work with manuscripts in my linguistic work. I'm an expert on early Christian scribal culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here. And the only reason I asked for clarification is because I want to make sure that what I'm addressing is actually what you mean,
Gotcha.
and not addressing something else. Because the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just a Greek, it's a 4th century Greek manuscript. Mm-hmm. It comes from approximately between 325 and 350 AD. And its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translation.
I gotta stop.
Yeah.
This is the funniest part, possibly, of the entire thing for me, because Billy is so used to being unchecked on his just wild claims.
Right.
He just says shit, and no one ever pushes back because he's so into these weirdo niche corners. And when he's like, oh, the Sinai Bible, which is him misstating Codex Sinaiticus, and Wes just goes, oh, hang on, I got one on my shelf.
Yeah.
And just pulls it down, and you can see Billy's soul just leaving his body. Yeah. And he knew he was cooked. So.
Chef's kiss, Wes. That was so.
Yeah.
That was honestly brilliant. That was excellent. As what happens with the best of us, I do have to say something though. And I think this is a problem in this entire exchange, is that I worry sometimes in Wes's responses that he is downplaying the situation from a critical scholarly perspective of a lot of what's going on here. So there's a couple of things here, right? Like in the first place, yes, he's absolutely correct. Codex Sinaiticus, and why on earth Billy thinks it's meaningful to compare the 5th century Greek Codex Sinaiticus to the 17th century English translation of the Bible, the King James Version. It's not like it's just not an apples to apples comparison. It's meaningless, honestly. Now, and he's absolutely right as well. You can read all about the crucifixion of Jesus in Codex Sinaiticus, but I have to say this: I think part of what Billy is drawing from is critical scholarly conversations with regards to the shape and the nature of the New Testament and its development over many centuries. And while it's true that the Codex Sinaiticus contains, the entire complete New Testament, it's not exactly the same as the New Testaments that are published in English in your Bibles. If not for Codex Sinaiticus, I might be wrong about this, but I believe it was sort of the mic drop manuscript to show us that texts such as John 8, the Pericope Adulterae, or the long ending of Mark at the end of Mark 16, were actual late additions and did not exist in the earliest forms of the New Testament, of these individual gospels. Codex Sinaiticus is an Alexandrian text, and there's this is important because it's one of the reasons why it's such an important manuscript of the New Testament is that it attests a text tradition that, as I believe, and maybe this isn't my field, so maybe my scholarship is a bit outdated on this, but I believe scholars still consider this to be kind of like the strongest, earliest form of the New Testament text. And I think, and I worry that in this exchange, Wes is downplaying a little bit, if not a lot, just some of the textual differences that scholars grapple with on a regular basis when it comes to assessing the text of the New Testament. And I think it's important to point out as well that the text of the New Testament is not unproblematic, and that the manuscript situation for it is part of what makes it problematic on an ongoing basis. So but maybe with that, let's continue and see what else he has to say about this.
From. So my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there. I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say, Matthew 27, where it has Jesus being crucified. And that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or, the John 19, or any of the other ones. So I think my confusion is that it doesn't read any differently. So actually, are you able to pull up a website with the viewers or listeners or whatever be able to see that?
Right now to make sure I have the version that I'm looking at.
The Sinai Bible. So
right.
From my own knowledge that I know, when I really studied all this, what I thought was interesting about the Bible was how many different eyewitness. I studied C.S. Lewis back in the day, how many different eyewitnesses and stuff there were. And they went on.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk a little bit more about him. But
okay, I'm just having trouble when you want to talk about contemporary eyewitness accounts to a first century event and you go to C.S. Lewis. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So hold on. I'll say
Yeah,
something else here too. I think maybe Vish and I watched a little bit of Wes's stream with Mike Jones last night, and he made this point, and I don't know this guy. I don't know Mark Minod, but Wes said that Mark's just a really, really genuine, sweet, sincere, wonderful guy, and I am sure that's true. But man, I gotta tell you, every time he started to talk in this this podcast, in this exchange, I was like, just please stop talking and let the grown-ups in the room, well, the grown-up in the room talk, please. But that's probably neither here nor there. Yeah, but we'll have more to say about C.S. Lewis in a little bit.
They were able to cross-reference throughout history and throughout those times, from my understanding. And those were different things that I always thought were kind of interesting, that I felt was a good concept of proof. And then I want Billy to answer. And also, I'm just curious, the Sinai Bible, where was that piece
I found
discovered?
the text where I was referencing. Actually, I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
Okay, yeah. Well, so that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with, there are two manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery. And so that's why I think it's important to get to these sources. So at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have 2 copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish, we see right off the bat that the Gospel of Barnabas, not to be confused with either the Epistle of Barnabas or the Acts of Barnabas, which are 2 apocryphal documents from the 2nd century, but the Gospel of Barnabas in particular, we know it's a forgery because it does things like in chapter 92, it says that Jesus spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, and then he came to the Jordan River and he walked to Jerusalem. But Mount Sinai is more than a week's journey away from Jerusalem, and neither Mount Sinai nor Jerusalem are close to the Jordan River. So never mind there not being a route from the Jordan River to like around Mount Sinai or going to Jerusalem. But there are internal problems with the Gospel of Barnabas, which indicate that it shows no actual indication of evidence of coming from or even having knowledge of 1st century Jewish understanding. It actually says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah, which indicates that whoever the author is, he didn't know that those were the same words. And I think a bigger problem is that the Gospel of Barnabas actually paraphrases Dante's Inferno, which was written in 1314. So there's a lot of internal evidences that disqualify the Gospel of Barnabas, never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century. And none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish. But the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient. And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante, or it also refers to a rule of the time of Jubilee, which was changed in the Middle Ages from what it was in the biblical year of Jubilee. And it goes with the Middle Ages concept, not the ancient concept. So I think what I'm getting at is, so I'm a historian, and I deal with sources. So when I'm looking at sources, I want to make sure that I have a methodology by which I approach any type of source. So if there is something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure that I'm analyzing it and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event. So if we're talking about, say, Codex Sinaiticus, that's in the 4th century. Now that is, I would agree with you, Billy, our oldest copy of the Bible in the sense of cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible.
Right.
The problem is that we have individual copies of all 4 Gospels going back hundreds of years before Codex Sinaiticus. So I have a facsimile behind me of P66. This is a late 2nd century copy of the Gospel of John. I work with this particular manuscript. I can just show the screen right here. This is an almost complete copy of the Gospel of John. And it has the crucifixion.
By any chance?
Okay, hold on there. Let's so listen. I honestly, I think Billy Carson might have been better off just sticking with the Sinai Bible instead of deciding he should maybe consult a modern forgery for his information on this. So yeah, I just once again, Wes, brilliant, very nicely done in terms of countering this nonsense. Yeah, I don't know if I have. Let's they start talking now about the guy. Actually at first I think he does some cool stuff here with his papyrus facsimiles. Let's watch that.
Okay, all right.
So the documents you actually see on my bookshelf behind me are facsimile papyri
This
that
is
I've
way
made.
cool, guys.
So when I was in Egypt last summer, I went and I got made for me some papyrus sheets. And so I take these papyrus sheets, which are made from the papyrus plant. And then when I go and I look at actual manuscripts, so I was at the University of Philadelphia last summer, and I went and I saw a document called P1, which is a 3rd century fragment of the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And so what I did,
look at this.
I sat down with that original, and I produced a facsimile. So I copied.
Hey, pause it there, Bish. Pause it there. Pause it there.
Cut it out.
Pause it there.
Oh man!
Look at this. I mean, what kind of a boss makes his own facsimiles of manuscripts, right? Come on, guys.
I mean, this is something that I'm looking to do, like, as I develop my calligraphy skills and get more proficient in Hebrew lettering, which is difficult. Like, you cutting your own quills and making your own ink and things like that. There's a whole
you have to.
I want to make reproductions so I can like use them as art pieces, because lettering like this to me is very artistic. It's very beautiful. So yeah,
it is.
Shout out Wes for making his own copies.
Guys, I happen to have and maybe I will show this to you here. Okay, I'm gonna show my screen here. for a minute.
Okay.
So I happen to have, I'm pulling up the virtual manuscript room at the University of Munster. There's a few different places you can go to look at New Testament manuscripts. This is one of them. So I decided let's pull this up. Let's take a look here. So this is P1. This is the actual P1. Can everybody see that? Looks pretty cool. But seriously, I think maybe the thing I'm most impressed by, my first reaction to this was, wow. As a guy who has spent a good chunk of his career investigating modern forgeries, my first thought was maybe I need to start keeping a closer eye on Wes Huff. But honestly, like, what are the hardest things? I mean, there's many difficult things to do when it comes to making reproductions and like high quality facsimiles. The material is one thing, the script is another. So like, take a look at the script there. Drink it in, everyone. Get a good look at it. Take a look at that, and maybe Vish, let's put Wes's facsimile back up on the stage here. Yeah, like, it's not perfect, right? Like, I think you should be. I can tell. I mean, right away, obviously, but that this isn't. It's not. It's clearly not the original. But my God, man, like, well done. Like, that's impressive. I really like this. I love the effort, and as someone who not so much Greek, but spends a lot of time in Hebrew scripts. I'm a Jewish paleographer, and not in the sense of what's been identified as the quote unquote Jewish script. I'm a paleographer of Jewish scripts. I get it. I get how difficult it is to learn a handwriting style and to mimic it then with a stylus on scale. The amount of work that goes into this, guys, it's a lot. Take a bow, Wes Huff, for your facsimiles. It's super impressive. So
with an X-Acto knife in not the original 3rd century one on my papyrus. I cut out with an X-Acto knife this guy, and then I copied the text transcriptionally on the front and the back. So papyrus is just simply what it's made out of.
It's just so good.
And so there's categorizing systems, and the standard one is called the Gregory Allant categorizing system. And so sometimes you'll see when manuscripts are mentioned, they'll have a GA and then a number behind it. If it's made of papyrus, you simply abbreviate the word papyrus to P, and then you have the numbering system. So P66, what I showed you earlier, that's this on the categorizing system. It's the 66th manuscript that was put into the system. It's from the Gospel of John. I also have, P46 and P47 on my shelf, which includes all 4 Gospels and Acts from the 2nd and 3rd centuries. So the only hesitation I have with what you said, Billy, is that we have single copies of the Gospels that can be dated to the 2nd century that all do have the crucifixion. And so if we're relying on something like the Gospel of Barnabas, which is not just like, it's not that there's debate about it, it's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than.
If you say it's a known forgery, yes, but I'm going to go with that. Let's talk about the Old Testament a little bit and leading up into the New.
Well, hold on, because do you mind if I address the Gospel of Jesus' wife?
Yeah, hold on a sec.
What was
so, like, that was also something that I thought was really important for Wes to make sure that they finished this, and that Billy Carson didn't get away with brushing this point off as if it's somehow unimportant or just a difference of opinion. I mean, at this point, and I'm not even sure if Billy Carson realizes how badly he has been owned by Wes Huff.
He would need to know more relevant information about the field to understand how bad it is.
Yeah.
And the thing is with Wes is this is the proper tactic you want to take with someone who's just spouting nonsense and trying to gish gallop. You pick one of the things that they talk about and you hold them to it. You make them finish their thoughts. You make them explain their reasoning and cite their sources. And usually it's just going to crumble, which I expect is exactly what's going to happen here. So,
indeed.
Yeah.
I'm like trying to write notes like I know what I'm doing, but I'm just curious.
So the Gospel of Jesus' Wife doesn't actually mention. So oftentimes what happens is that the text of the Gospel of Jesus' Wife is kind of paralleled with the Gospel of Philip, which mentions that Mary Magdalene, that Jesus would kiss Mary Magdalene on the mouth. And so those are kind of used in parallel to kind of for this argument that Jesus was married. So the Gospel of Jesus' Wife is in the Harvard Library. However, the reason we know it's also not legitimate is because even though the manuscript, the papyrus that it's on, was carbon dated to the 4th century, the text was actually copied from a PDF version of the Gospel of Thomas known as Grandin's Interlinear. And there was a mistake in the Coptic text of Grandin's Interlinear that was copied into the Gospel of Jesus' Wife. So we know that this is not a legitimate document, even though the papyrus is ancient, and this happens a lot with forgeries. I have a couple of friends who have actually worked on projects that have revealed forgeries within Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts and within other ancient.
Hey, pause it for a second.
But
pause it. I think that's me, guys. Was that me, Wes? Were you talking about me? I think that might have been me. All right.
Reason why we know the Gospel of Jesus' Wife, and that Karen King, who kind of vouched for it, and kind of she lost a lot of credibility, unfortunately, for her, and she's admitted that it's a fake as well, was because we can tie it directly to not copying from an ancient text, but actually copying from an online version of the Gospel of Thomas in a PDF form, and the mistake on that PDF form was copied into the text that was borrowed in the phraseology of Jesus' wife. So I just point that out is, once again, with our sourcing, I think we need to make sure that we're going towards not just early sources, but actually credible sources. And unfortunately, neither the Gospel of Barnabas nor the Gospel of Jesus' Wife are credible sources in terms of actually, and agreed upon by not just the vast majority of scholarship, but I don't know anybody in the field of papyrology, paleography, historiography, who actually refers to these documents as being legitimate.
That's fair enough. That's I can respect that. So let's go into the Old Testament a little bit. Predominantly from my research, I discovered that a lot of information from the Enuma Elish.
Is that?
Did you want to talk about anything that they've got so far?
So I think so. Now, first of all, I have to say, there's a special spot in my black heart for the Gospel of Jesus' Wife. I'll tell you a story. The year, I think it was 2015. It was the summer of 2015. I was in Norway at a conference. This conference, actually, it was a fantastic conference. I have a coffee mug. The name of the conference was Fragments of an Unbelievable Past, Constructions of Provenance and Narratives of Forgery. What does that say? 14th to 16th September. The year isn't on there, I don't think. But so I was at this conference in the summer. I had the chance to sit down and chat extensively with Nina Burleigh, who wrote an excellent book. She was a journalist for a bunch of different places. She's worked for the New York Times and other major outlets in the U.S. But I had the chance to chat with her fairly extensively because she had written this really, really good book about the famous forgery of the James ossuary. And when we were at this conference, we were right in the middle of a lot of this Dead Sea Scrolls forgery investigation. And as a last minute surprise arrival at this conference was Ariel Sabar, who is also an excellent journalist. He had just published his long form expose of the Gospel of Jesus' Wife in the Atlantic. Like it had come out only a few months earlier, and he was there for the whole conference. He actually sat down because he told me that he wanted to do some. He told me that he was working on the book, and he wanted to sit down and pick my brain and do an interview about Dead Sea Scrolls forgeries. And he turned that he turned that investigation into a really, really good book called Veritas, where he basically goes looking for the forger of the Gospel of Jesus' wife. But I wanted to point out here, first of all, this is exactly how we do this work when it comes to investigating authenticity claims about manuscripts, especially on provenance manuscripts after the fact, right? And this is a big part of why scholars are just so reluctant and probably should not be dealing with provenance material in the first place, just because it's just, yeah, there's a whole bunch there. But yes, looking for these clues, these sorts of mistakes that can only occur in modern times. This is exactly the same sorts of things that we were doing with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, I did want to say something else, though. The Gospel of Jesus' wife is a known forgery, but I think it's important to point out, Wes, I mean, it was good. He mentioned also the Gospel of Philip there as a text. The Gospel of Philip I think the manuscript, I'm not sure if there's multiple manuscripts, but I know the manuscript from the Nag Hammadi library, where it was first discovered, dates to I think it's the late 4th century. I might be wrong on that. Someone can correct me. I'm pretty sure it's 4th century though. The actual text itself, the composition was I think scholars say late 3rd is when it was probably written, but it's important that he mentioned it, I think. But I also worry that in a presentation like this, the general response to something like this is that Billy just said something outlandish about Jesus potentially having a wife on the basis of this modern forgery, this gospel of Jesus' wife. But the fact of the matter is that one of the reasons why this particular manuscript managed to convince Karen King, the editor and the brilliant professor of New Testament studies at Harvard, one of the reasons a manuscript like this managed to convince her and a lot of other people at the time that it was first making the rounds and the preliminary publications, was because this was not, on its own such a crazy idea. It's not on its own such a crazy idea. We have a text in something like the Gospel of Philip where Jesus describes Mary Magdalene as his companion. And I know a number of scholars have mused that this is a romantic companion. This is a sexual companion. Now, this is not to say, let's be clear, the Gospel of Philip is also super late, but let's also not downplay what am I looking for? Like the milieu of early Christianity, the sorts of discussions and conversations that were taking place as late as the 3rd, 4th century, surrounding Jesus's sex life, surrounding concepts of who Jesus was and what he did. Importantly, the farther back we go, the less really strong access we have to the life and times of the historical Jesus and to the extensive pluriformity of the early church. So I just thought it's important to, yes, this is a mic drop moment for Wes in this conversation with Billy Carson, because he's drawing these ideas from a modern forgery. But once again, this is one of these situations where I worried that people are prone to misunderstand, I think, another critical point here with regards to the shape of the church, the shape and the composition of early Christianity, the shape and composition of the early manuscript evidence here. So, but yeah, let's. I got a couple more super chats we can read. fairly quickly here. I'll just pull those up, Vish. It's okay. Oh, but I'm going to need your help with this one. Happy Soul Invictus. And I'm not
Guadalupe, Alupe.
Thank you.
I think that's probably a typo, but yeah.
Thank you. I very much appreciate it. Thank you so much, Marcos Almalos, too, for the generous super chat. And Giromide, I don't think I've seen you around here before, so welcome. If you're new. Oh, thanks. I'm bad at recognizing things, so but thanks for being here, and thank you so much for the super chat. Yes, Billy is dissociating. Shall we move on?
And the 7 tablets of creation is a lot of the in Genesis, a lot of the creation story that comes into Genesis. Not all of it, but because obviously it's a smaller, Genesis is a much smaller version of a much bigger story. But it's literally almost word for word from the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation. The Epic of Atrahasis as well is also there in the Old Testament. Several other tablets as well, Code of Hammurabi and a few others have made it into that text. Sumerian cylinder scrolls that talk about the creation story. Again, the creation story in the Epic of Atrahasis. And so we tend to see this copying of ancient tablets, text, and scriptures, even some papyruses, into the biblical text. Meaning that my point here is that I think a lot of people are saying that this information was written in real time. A lot of people believe that. If you ask the average person, they really believe that. But a lot of this information is just copied from older tablets and texts from an earlier date. That's what I found, that it's made it into the canonized Bible, but they never reference that they got it from any other ancient texts and tablets that have to do with a totally different civilization with totally different religious beliefs.
Have you read the
pause it there for a second, Vish. I want to say something quick. So something I think Billy just said, these sorts of ancient texts and traditions are, he says, quoted word for word, within the biblical myths that we have in the Old Testament, without anybody even knowing it or referencing it or providing any credit to it. So it's people, I think, fail to understand this a lot of times, just how different writing and the circulation of literature even worked in antiquity. Listen, guys. Literature was everything that was out there. There was very little that was what we would identify as original. There was no such thing as plagiarism or intellectual property in many parts of this world, and as a result, we tend to get this false impression as if the Bible's trying to hide something from us, when it leaves out its fairly obvious source material, it's we don't know it because of course these things aren't cited, and we're not immersed in this world, and we're not immersed in this ancient literature from which the Bible draws from regularly, this rich literary culture in which the biblical authors are immersed. But let's continue and see what Wes has to say about
I've done lecture.
Do you mind summarizing the content of the?
I particularly like this part.
Sure.
Just hold on a second, because I feel like people need to get ready for this. If any of you actually knows the Enuma Elish, or if you've read it, or if you're even let's say casually familiar with it, you need to buckle up, because Billy Carson is going to give you, I mean, it's a summary of the Enuma Elish. I'll just say that. Let's hear it.
Very ancient text discovered in the Library of Ashurbanipal. And the summary of it is that it really gives us an account, which is crazy, an astronomical account of the creation of our solar system. It talks about planets and moons gaining specific orbits around the sun. It talks about a huge planet named Tiamat, 4 to 6 times larger than Earth. Earth didn't exist at the time that this, according to the author of this text, which is pretty interesting. And then there talks about a nemesis of sorts. In the original version, it's called Nibiru, but in a more recent version, still thousands of years old, the name was changed to Marduk. Marduk is in the Jewish American Library, in the biblical text, in the Torah, and so forth. Very popular figure in ancient times in the religious books and texts. Marduk wanted to be the destroyer, so Marduk is the one that during its next orbit towards.
Look, I know that not everybody speaks Akkadian, Sumerian, ancient Near Eastern languages. I get this.
What?
But my man, it's not Marduk. It's Marduk. That is a long vowel, and it would be a lot easier to take any of his claims seriously if he could at least get the title of these deities right and get their names right. But you know, hey, whatever you want to do, Billy Carson. Marduk. Quack, quack.
Tiamat, crashed into Tiamat, destroyed Tiamat. A huge chunk of it swung away, recoalesced, taking the water, land, and organic material, which basically recoalesced as our planet here, Earth. And the rest of it broke up into pieces. Some of it turned into the asteroid belt. Other parts of it were thrown towards the sun, and some were thrown towards the inner Oort cloud, towards the outer edge of the solar system. This planet, or this moonlet that orbited supposedly a brown dwarf, based on the description of it, gained a very strange orbit around our sun. And we have the scientific evidence now also to match with NASA's data, where we see that Saturn and I believe Neptune switch places. Uranus is flipped on its side, and that's more evidence that something came through our solar system in ancient.
Hey, did you know that Venus rotates backwards? Sorry, I just thought we were naming things about astronomy that we know. Like, he's just going, Uranus rotates on its side, and scientists say that. Like, what? None of this is in the Enuma Elish. What is he talking about?
No, it's not. Very astute, Vishanti.
I just
and
gravitationally really tugged at planets here and switched up their orbits, and even pulled the axis of a planet on its own side, where the equator is now running north and south. So a little bit of modern astrophysics kind of backs up.
Hold on a second. And I'm curious. So there's a lot of people in the chat, and I am curious if anybody in the chat knows anything about astronomy. Because I'm interested in this. Is that true? Is it true that if I understand him correctly, he said that Uranus.
Uranus's axis of rotation is almost entirely horizontal. So, like, unlike most of the other planets, it's rotating essentially on its side.
Yeah,
the axis is very, 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 very tilted.
Did he say that it shifted? Did I hear him say that?
If I parsed his BS, it was gravity something something. Uranus is on its side. It's in the Enuma Elish somehow. I'm not seeing how he's threading this needle.
It's a hell of a needle.
And he's talking about like planets and asteroids getting thrown out into the inner Oort cloud, which, by the way, is, let me understate this, really far away.
Yeah,
I can't underestimate that anymore. How real far the inner Oort cloud is proposed to be. At the speed of light, it would take, as they say, a real long time to get there.
Look at just before we move. Look at Wes's face, Vish. Like, look at that. He's a mood. Draining. He is absolutely. It's everything that he can do. He's coming out. It's wow. All right.
I hope that Wes is okay with me like screenshotting some of these like freeze frames for reaction memes, because it's a mood. And as Apologia says, oh, the scientific evidence matches NASA observations. Handy.
It always is. It's funny how that works, eh?
Yeah. I mean, but hey, if we want to talk about astronomy facts, there are lots of other channels for that, if he really wants to. But okay, let's see.
All right, the Enuma Elish, everyone.
Enuma also then begins to talk about the fact that these beings, it kind of cuts into the fact that these beings, are on Earth, and at some point begin to engage mankind. In other words, they didn't create people from scratch, but they engaged the existing hominid and began to utilize us as workers for their workforce. In the Atrahasis epic, you see a much similar story, slightly later date period, but still thousands of years old, the epic of Atrahasis. And we see a very similar story. And we see where the sons of God literally came down to Earth. They came from Mars, according to this text. If you read the translation of the planet Mars, and
did it say Mars?
They came from Mars. If you read the text, Vish, it's
he said a translation. So that's not in the original text. Okay.
To English. And then they went to battle. They were going to go to battle in South Africa against Enki and Lil and Anu. And
does he mean South Africa geographically or South Africa the nation state?
At this point, he might mean the latter. Honestly, who can say?
And they come to terms without going to battle. They argued that they needed women, human women, believe it or not. And they also...
Mars needs women, angry young women. I'm sorry. I had to bust out the Billy, or the Rob Zombie there for Billy.
Yeah, man.
You should see Rob Zombie in concert, by the way.
Wanted a workforce. They didn't want to continue to do the labor. They were cleaning out the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, digging canals, building cities on Earth, and according to the text on Mars, not according to me.
It's hard work, guys.
A decision was made by Enki and Anu and Enlil to allow this experiment to happen, where they would take the existing hominid here. They would slay one of the gods, meaning that they would, in my opinion, that doesn't mean they're going to kill it, but somehow some type of genetic modification or manipulation, in my personal opinion, that's my personal hypothesis.
That's your personal hypothesis.
Are now doing a lot of this labor and worshiping these people as gods, as they, my personal opinion, masqueraded as gods. A lot of stories there, parallel stories that you see in the Bible, even the Tower of Babel incident, and many other crazy stories that are in the Bible.
Pause it.
Happen to be a little bit of an armchair expert on the subject, if I do say so myself.
So, the Enuma Elish, everyone. That was apparently the Enuma Elish. And my my God. And I feel bad about if I left y'all hanging there on this absolutely dog shit presentation of the contents of the Enuma Elish. So I'm not going to read. I'm not even going to read much of it. I'm going to give you just a tiny little bit of a summary here about what this text is and what it's about. So I'm working on a book currently, and I've written a little bit. One of the places where I've written a little bit about the Enuma Elish is in chapter 7, where I do discuss in great detail this first creation story in Genesis chapter 1, and the relationship of that text, the Enuma Elish. So, but I'll just give you my own little summary here of the contents of the Enuma Elish. This is the accurate one. Okay, so don't get confused. And if you're confused on how on earth this relates in any way, shape, or form to what Billy Carson just said, then yes, join the club. Okay, so the Enuma Elish. Where are we here? The text is so named Enuma Elish because these are the words with which it begins. Enuma Elish, when on high. The heaven had not yet been named, firm ground below had not been called by name. So the story opens with ancient first-order gods, Tiamat and Apsu, bringing forth the rest of the gods from out of the dark seas. But Tiamat, the frothing, tyrannical, primordial sea, is at once irritated by the disturbance of new life. I have to let my dog out here for a second, guys. Sorry. Okay, I'm back. So, yes, Tiamat, the frothing, tyrannical, primordial sea, who is at once irritated by the disturbance of new life. Their ways are verily loathsome unto me. By day I find no relief nor repose by night. I will destroy, I will wreck their ways, that quiet may be restored. Let us have rest. Then Marduk is created. He was the loftiest of the gods, surpassing was his stature, his members were enormous. Had more than one, by the way. He was exceedingly tall. Tiamat amasses her forces of terrifying monsters led by her consort Kingu, and she... Am I still there? Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. Thanks, Fish. Marduk summons the forces of the seven winds as he charges at Tiamat. Then joined issue Tiamat and Marduk, wisest of gods. They strove in single combat, locked in battle. The Lord spread out his net over to enfold her. The evil wind, which followed behind, he let loose in her face when Tiamat opened her mouth to consume him. He drove in the evil wind that she closed not her lips. As the fierce winds charged her belly, her body was distended and her mouth was wide open. He released the arrow. It tore her belly. It cut through her inside, splitting the heart. She's dead. Upon her defeat, the gods rejoice and join Marduk to celebrate the death of the great tyrant. Marduk stops on Tiamat's course. He cleaves her in half and fashions from her remains the sky and the sea. He split her like a shellfish into two parts. Half of her he set up and sealed it as sky, pulled down the bar and posted guards. He bade them to allow not her waters to escape. Marduk then fashioned the firmament, or I think it's the plate actually in the Enuma Elish. The great abode, its likeness he fixed as Eshara. The great abode, Eshara, which he made as the firmament or the plate. He dispatched the gods to their stations in the sky. He constructed stations for the great gods, fixing their astral likeness as the images. Marduk finally erected the calendar. He determined the year by designating the zones. He set up 3 constellations for each of 12 months. After defining the days of the year by means of heavenly figures, he founded the station of Nibiru to determine their bands, their heavenly bands, that none might transgress or fall short. So the picture here is of a tremendous cosmic battle between the gods. Marduk vanquishes the great god Tiamat, and from her remains are created the elements of the universe. I felt bad just leaving you there without actually having some sort of sense on what the Enuma Elish is actually about. But let's listen now and let's see what Wes has to say about it.
You can find a lot of those true stories in the ancient texts, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, where you can find the true story of Noah. They found the Noah tablet to give him instructions on how to build the ark. It wasn't a big boat; it was a round disc that he built with the sections cut up on the inside like a pie. That was discovered about 4 or 5 years ago. I believe it's at the British Museum now.
Sorry, did I miss where Noah was not building a boat, but some kind of round disc? Did I miss that?
Yeah, I mean, it's to be fair, the shape of the boat that the Upnapishtim builds in the Atrahasis is it's like round, right? Like it's a round boat. So
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, so if you want to read, quote, the true story of Noah, I don't think you need to be going to places that don't even talk about Noah. That's just my opinion,
true.
though.
Fair enough. Yes, that's a good point, Bish.
So there's a lot of text that's just been covered and copied over into the biblical text. And I think that, in my personal opinion, a lot of people are just became a cargo cult, worshiping people that were masquerading as gods. I do believe in God, by the way. Let me make this clear. I believe in God. I believe there's I believe in it as a creator of the universe. I believe that the mathematics, the quantum physics all proves that. The fact that we're here, I believe this universe is imbued with a divine energy and a divine spark that lives inside of all of us. I just don't believe that the God of the Bible is truly the creator of the universe. I don't think that God needs money. I don't think that God needs...
Sure. Do you mind if I just jump in here for a second? Because I think...
Yes, please.
Yes, we've kind of gone on from the original question. I appreciate that. I do have a few issues with your summary, although I think I have read the Akkadian version. My Akkadian's not great, but I sat down with a seriologist friend and we walked through it a couple of years ago. So I think that there are components of what you said that I would say are in there. I'm not sure it's the best summary. Nonetheless, okay, going with what you said.
Goodness.
You said that there were like verbatim.
My God. This is the most charitable assessment of what Billy just barfed out of his mouth that I could imagine.
Also, quantum mechanics, it sounds fancy. It's just talking about really, really, really tiny physics. But anybody who uses quantum outside of a physics like scenario, automatically I'm just going to dismiss them because they just want something that sounds like mystical science.
Yep.
Parallels with the biblical creation story. Even just going off of what you said, which I think there are components of that I would agree with, the Battle of the Gods, the concept of Enki and the younger gods, and they fight Tiamat, and then Marduk, who swears he'll defeat Tiamat, and Kwenku, who kills Tiamat by shooting her with an arrow, and there's this big battle, and then the gods that die end up being the earth and the sky and even us, because we are the end result of that battle. I'm just curious, when you say that there are not just parallels, but there's actual copying, looking at Genesis chapter 1 and 2, where the creation story is summarized in the Bible, what are the actual kind of parallels there that you're looking to? Because as someone who's read both, I not only do I not find parallels, I actually, and this is the majority of ancient Near Eastern scholarship with me, think that Genesis chapter 1 is actually an apologetic against documents like the Enuma Elish. So what are the parallels there?
Separated the waters from the waters, for example. That's in the Enuma Elish, and that's also in the biblical text.
Okay, that I would agree is a parallel. The only reason I highlight that is that if you're making this the argument, because if you brought it up, and I mean this with all due respect, there are superficial parallels. I would agree. The separation of the water, the concept of the earth being formless and void. That's also in the Enuma Elish. However, I think all the other details, it's the details that make the difference, and if we're looking at not the superficial crossovers, but the actual themes and concepts of what it's saying, you don't have a creation within 7 days. I'm
not going to take the Enuma Elish and put it into the biblical text. There's certain words that they utilize that let me know that they copied it from that text. Like, for example,
so what words?
Separating the water from the waters, the void, the earth being void. That information is literally just copied over. So it tells you that somebody saw that and said, let me add it to this book right here. Let me add it to the scripture of this papyrus, because it wasn't a book yet.
The reason why I say it's actually an apologetic against that is because the purpose of the Enuma Elish, which the Babylonians read every Babylonian New Year, was to point out the fact that the deities, and there's countless deities in the Babylonian pantheon, they actually come from the created order. So they're not outside of time and space. They actually come from the created order. And when they die in this battle, right, when Tiamat is defeated, the defeated gods become the earth and the sky and the plants and even you and me. And in that sense, the theme is that you don't actually have any purpose or end result, and you're not created in the image of God. In fact, in the ancient Babylonian system, only the kings were created in the image of God. And what we see that is counter to that is that even, sure, there's superficial, divided the waters, but we find that in almost every society and culture. That's not a parallel as much as it's just a generality. I would say what we see within the biblical account is that God purposefully creates. There's only one God. He purposefully creates, and then he creates, and it's good. And it continues to say it's good 7 times. And then at the end of chapter 1, just for the thick people in the original audience, it says, and then it was very good. And then he creates humanity, not kings, but simply the humans that he creates in God's image. And they have purpose and meaning, and that instills them with this creation order. And that's not what we find in the Enuma Elish. In fact, we find the opposite in the Enuma Elish, is that the created order is not good. It's a mistake, and that you are not created in the image of God. And there's a reminder that regular people are not created in the image of God. So linguistically, I mean, Hebrew does have Semitic ties with Akkadian, doesn't with Sumerian. Sumerian is a language isolate, agglutinizing language.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, just with all due respect, the parallels linguistically are not there. There might be superficial kind of concepts that are there, but they're so superficial that we can find them in everything. In the sense of, I'm in an office studio, you're in your office studio. That doesn't mean that that we're the same people or we're even in the same place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, this is something that he doesn't really go into this very much, I don't think, but this is something that Digital Hammurabi, Josh Bowen, he's talked about on his channel, is that the biblical flood account is a polemic against the Enuma Elish, because those gods are very much not invested in what humanity is doing, consider humanity a nuisance, and just are like, we can wipe them out, whatever, versus the narrative that you're provided in the Hebrew text, where it's like God cares very much and is very invested, and that is a complete inverse perspective on like your interaction with deity. And it's like, the more you unpack that, the more you start to realize it's not copied, it's a polemic. Those are two different things. But I get it chic to be like, the Bible's so dumb, it copied everything. And it's like, no, that's not how that worked.
Yeah. So and I think, like, in principle, sorry, what's he is that? Sorry, okay, Epic of Gilgamesh. Yeah.
Epic Gilgamesh. Thank you.
So in principle, I think Wes is making mostly accurate statements here about what's going on between the Enuma Elish and the first creation story in Genesis 1. There's two. There's the first creation story in Genesis chapter 1. There's a second creation story in Genesis chapter 2 and 3 that kind of bleeds into the formative primeval, so-called primeval history of J, right? The J history. But this is one of these moments where, like, I get where he's going, but by the same token, let's be clear that I think what Billy is also trying to do is to point out that there is a relationship to be seen between a text like the Enuma Elish and Genesis chapter 1. I think he's presenting it I mean, he clearly has absolutely no idea what he's reading. He doesn't understand these texts. But besides, and I think his appraisal of the literature is just bizarre. But there's an important thing that he's keying in on here, even if by accident, and that is that scholars for a long time now have seen that you can't read Genesis chapter 1. You can't read these texts in a vacuum. These texts are in conversation with the world in which they were produced, the world in which the first creation story, what's often called the priestly creation account, or the P-creation story, the story in Genesis 1, the world in which this was produced was a world that was pretty saturated. In this text in particular, the Enuma Elish, I don't think there's any question to be had that the author of Genesis 1 knew the Enuma Elish and was writing with this certainly at least in the background of his mind. And
it's almost like these cultures lived next to each other and influenced each other.
Yeah. Can I read something quickly here? David Carr published a brilliant book in 2020 about the formation of it's called The Formation of Genesis chapter 1 to 11. And he makes a couple of important points here about the relationship between Genesis chapter 1 and the Enuma Elish. He says that where am I here? He first notes that some of the contrast between Genesis 1:1 to 2:3 and the Enuma Elish stand as part of a broader way. That the picture of creation in Genesis 1:1 to 2:3 decisively opposes central features of the Mesopotamian creation tradition as a whole. Am I reading it from the right place? Hold on, let me look at my notes. I might have skipped ahead. Oh, sorry. I need to skip back here. Okay. Sorry, everyone. The focus of many elements of Genesis 1 on demonstrating God's power through God's sovereign control over the creation resembles the focus of the Enuma Elish epic on demonstrating Marduk's absolute supremacy through his creative and other powers. In addition, the description of God's creation of the cosmos in Genesis 1 features many of the same elements that occur in the description of Marduk's creation of the cosmos. Marduk's splitting of the upper and lower oceans through erecting a roof made of Tiamat's carcass, his organization of the world waters, his creation of the heavenly bodies and placement of them in the water-free space, and his role in creation of humanity, instigating that creation through consulting with Ea. And I don't know if you heard it. I hope people heard it when I was reading through just my very, very brief summary, those places where the Enuma Elish was quoted. Even through the translation, you could hear some of the even just the echoes that are there between the ways in which things are phrased in Genesis chapter 1. Moreover, Carr continues, a closer look reveals that many parallel elements between the Enuma Elish and Genesis 1 appear more deeply rooted in the former, while they stand as relatively isolated blind motifs in the latter. And this is a really important point. Just for the sake of simplification, what a blind motif is a shared idea or a shared term that comes from a different language and maybe a different culture that ends up getting calcified into a new tradition or a new myth in such a way that it's something that starts to happen even instinctively. You know, people over time don't even come to the point where they maybe don't even recognize the significance of this original word or this original idea insofar as it's playing a new role in a new text. So, blind motifs. For example, in Genesis chapter 1, verses 6 to 7, this resembles Marduk's separation of oceans in the Enuma Elish, where Marduk separated the upper and lower seas with a heavenly roof made of Tiamat's carcass. Yet in contrast to the Enuma Elish, we never hear what this roof is in Genesis, what it's made of in Genesis 1, 6 to 8. In this sense, the heavenly plate of Genesis 1 is a blind motif, likely taken from the Enuma Elish, where the corpse roof theme marks both the defeat of Marduk's foe and the outset of creation. When we come later to the purposes of the heavenly bodies of Genesis 1:14, the listing of festivals, days, and years corresponds to later priestly emphases on festivals, days, and years. See other examples in Leviticus 23, Numbers 28 to 29. But the mention of signs in this list stands out. The latter motif may have its original home in the Enuma Elish, where Marduk sets the stars in the heaven to provide heavenly signs used in astral divination, so important to the Babylonian literate culture. Such astral divination has no place in priestly ideology, and so this mention of signs in 1:14 represents another blind motif in the text, faintly reflecting its precursor, Enuma Elish text, but soon discarded as Genesis 1 proceeds to its report of God's execution of God's intent in 1:16 to 18, where the stars are barely mentioned. And the focus is exclusively on how the sun and moon distinguish day and night. Finally, there's a strange mention in God's creation of great sea monsters. This is the Hataninem Hagadolim. In Genesis 1:21, monsters not mentioned in God's internal creation order in 1:20, and not reproducing according to their kind. Again, here we may have a blind motif in Genesis 1 echoing Tiamat, the sea dragon, so prominent in the Enuma Elish, though here she, along with any other sea monsters, is demoted in Genesis 1 into another creature in the list of God's creations. I'm just going to skip forward here to some of the things, some of Carr's concluding thoughts of this. He says the fraught relationship between Genesis 1:1 to 2:3 with its non-biblical precursor texts, especially the Enuma Elish, means that there will always be those who emphasize the similarities to such precursors and others who emphasize its dissimilarities. Moreover, it must be stressed once again that any specific connotations that Genesis 1 has to the Enuma Elish, Atrahasis, or other known texts occurs within the context of a probable, broader, and more amorphous interaction with some other non-biblical precursors, likely including lost written texts and oral traditions to which we lack access. That said, the example of the Enuma Elish is particularly promising for illustrating how interpretation can be enriched through attention to diachronic precursors. And this is so for several reasons. First, the Enuma Elish was one of the most often copied, taught, cited, and performed texts in Babylonia, where the Judean exiles found themselves. This increases the likelihood that this epic might have been known in some form by Judean scribes. Second, in articulating Marduk's absolute unquestioned dominance, the Enuma Elish stands as a powerful articulation of the power of the Babylonian Empire, and its concluding celebration of Marduk's Esagilus temple stood as a stark challenge to the Judeans' attachment to a Jerusalem temple that now stood in ashes. Third, as discussed above, Genesis 1 shows multiple and specific connections to the Enuma Elish epic. Connections that provide more substantiation of a likely genetic intertextual link that one usually finds between biblical and non-biblical traditions. This range of connections as grounds a reading of Genesis 1 as, in part, a likely response to the epic, or sorry, the Enuma Elish epic. So that was probably a more complex, a slightly more involved response, similar to what Wes is saying. But I gotta say, I don't think Wes is making this point strongly enough. And this is the frustration with nuance, right? But I also this is the frustration that I often have with apologetics, and I sure hope, Wes, that that this is more so the former than the latter.
He had to step away, take care of some family stuff.
What happened?
He had to step away from the stream to take care of some family stuff.
Okay, all right. So when you watch this back, please take that as my constructive criticism and my plead for nuance. Is that good? That makes sense?
Sure.
Should we look at some super chats?
We keep going? Or yeah, we can do super chats.
Let's read it. There's a few coming in here, so let's maybe take a look at these first, and then we can continue. And we should probably talk about the time. Enuma Elish says that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Thanks, Jeremiah, for the super chat. Eber Costa, is Carson trying to be a crazier Graham Hancock?
They're in the same pod.
In the same, they're in the same pod. All these ancient alien guys, they're
peas in a pod.
They're peas in a pod. Jeremiah, wow, thanks so much for all the engagement, Jeremiah. Do you guys just put that word quantum in front of everything? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. Awesome. Thanks for the super chat. Domingo Aviles, could you elaborate on only kings being created in the image of gods? I thought it meant gods and humans look alike and kings are humans. Yeah. So I mean, I think this is also another important point in me, and a point on which I would depart from my friend Wes here. I think the image of God as a concept is wildly, badly misunderstood. I think it's the original import of the idea in the Hebrew creation myth of Genesis chapter 1 had much more to do with what the gods look like than how they functioned. Not denying that function is in there, but importantly, I think also that function has more to do with separating what humans do from what the animals do. The humans look like the gods. They're created in the image of God. That's literally what it means. The word image, tselem, it's selem and what's the other one? I can't think of it offhand. Somebody will remind me in the chat. But these words that are used to describe the image and likeness of God are used throughout the Hebrew Bible only to describe like statues, idols, altars, pictures, structures, models, these sorts of things. So I think that the sense in that text is essentially as it reads, that this is what we look like. We look like the gods. But then again, it's not so much a democratizing expression. I don't feel. I think maybe some of that's in there, but I don't really see that as the priority. When I read the text, to me, it looks like this is a way of separating humans from animals. Humans rule because humans are the ones that look like the gods and behave like the gods. So that's maybe all I'll say about that. But thank you, Domingo, for the question. It's a good one. Jared Dasein I'm butchering that, and I apologize. Thank you very much for the $5 super chat. That Genesis refers back to earlier creation accounts make it hard to agree with Jordan Peterson's claim that the Bible is the first book. Well, yeah, right.
Who believes him for anything, literally?
Yeah, yeah. Especially problematic to this is, as I mean, in dating the Bible is a complicated, problematic issue in and of itself. But you know, when it comes to looking at something even like the Book of Genesis, this is almost like a prequel. Like the Book of Genesis is a late text. I think the vast majority of scholars are telling us these days that it's post-exilic. This has been, you know, the standard scholarship for some time now. But I'm actually kind of pushing and venturing into the position that the Book of Genesis could be as late as the early Hellenistic period. It's a very, very late text. It's spicy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I you know, don't hold me too hard. Like, don't hold me to that. This is an idea that I'm toying with, and there's an involved explanation for all of that, right? But
it's going to be in your book, right?
Maybe.
Right.
I'm not even sure I've worked this idea out to that level. It's certainly not something.
Yeah, actually, let me gonna highlight this one real quick.
Okay.
The sources or the redaction. That is the good
yeah. That is a very important clarifying point, because indeed, Simone, there's a lot of very early source material in the Book of Genesis. I'm talking about the current, like the product as we have it, but I also tend to think that the combination of those sources in even things that I would identify as something like J or P are probably not even that early either. I think a lot of this stuff is just coming together pretty late and pretty quickly. But the source is certainly, like, there's parts of the text, right? Like Genesis chapter 48, 49 is very, very ancient. It's very ancient. All right. Let's look at this one. Wade Rogers. You gonna read it? Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Dr. Kill, hello, my Canadian friend from your neighbor in Alaska. These guys make Graham Hancock look intelligent. As for linguistic changes, think of the word gay. It once meant happy. Rock on, dude.
Thank you very much, Wade.
Language is fluid.
Very appreciate it.
Language is fluid, not static.
It's very fluid.
Michael Beverly for $5. Dr. Kip, I want to be famous too. Help.
Dude. You're maybe you should go talk to to Wes, because I don't know, man. I can't help you with that. I don't know how to answer that question. I'm sorry. Okay, so guys, I have been going for almost 2 hours, and there's a bunch of stuff that I want to get through here. And some of the more important stuff is closer to the end. So we're venturing onto parts of this debate discussion that I personally didn't find them all that interesting or meaningful. Certainly not for the kind of work that I do, and I think the kind of things that you look for from me when you come onto my channel. So I think I'm good to go for a little while longer yet. I had planned on this probably being a bit on the longer side, but I think April Parker is asking for a part 2. I'm reluctant to do that, just because that requires scheduling. So I don't know. I think yeah. I've heard you, Vadim. I've heard you loud and clear many times. So I actually didn't mean to hit that, but it's good to see you, Graham Pong. Sorry. The Torah and such maybe I should read that. I actually hit it by accident, but it looks interesting. The Torah and Septuagint were not co-created under Ptolemy True in Alexandria. Neither Greek nor Hebrew was Old Greek. Both were Where's the rest
is
of it?
original.
Yep.
Like original.
No, yeah, that's the
or original gangsta, which that would actually make that cooler.
It's true. And no, I can't plan very far ahead. I was looking for the rest of your chat, Graham Pong, but I think like this is a very, very complicated issue. Yes, I would agree. Apology assist, keep going. Why though? Like seriously, I mean, you're already suffering through one of me. I guess the question, Paul, is why are you doing it twice? By the way, keep your eyes open, everyone, for Apologia video coming out. And boy, speaking of long videos, I feel like I should apologize in advance for that one.
Gonna be a doozy.
Yeah, it feels kind of necessary though. So let's do this, Vish. Let's jump to about
8.
I do want to let's hear some of this stuff about C.S. Lewis. I think it's kind of important. So maybe jump up to like 35, 36. Let's go there. I promised a C.S. Lewis reveal. So let's at least do that, right? And then we'll see.
C.S. Lewis is someone that I really respect because I'm an entrepreneur. I think outside the box. Always.
Like, just a second, guys in the chat. Like seriously, give it up. That was a perfect hit. Incredible. Well done, Vishanti. Wow. This is why she's producing, guys. All right.
He just literally gave me timestamps, so it's not like.
And you didn't. I don't even think you got like close to it, right? Like I don't even think it wasn't right on. I think it was like. But anyways, that was brilliant. Way to go, Vish.
You already cut this down, bro. You gave me timestamps. This is easy. I just went to the timestamp.
All right.
It's not that deep.
You should be. No one should just be like sheep and follow what any of us are saying. Like, do your research on your own with everything, of course. But what led you, sorry, going back to C.S. Lewis real quick. He was a famous scholar who was once an atheist, set out on a journey to basically disprove the Bible. As he went to do that, he himself found out that to be like one of the most historically accurate written books, which really shocked him. He then became a Christian after that. He's done the Narnia movies, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or their books. They weren't movies when he passed away. But he has an amazing... I love people like him because he doesn't just act like... He always was questioning everything. Did you take it? I don't want to put... did you take it upon like whatever I continue to discover... I'm going to have to accept, like, say something you did find when you were in Egypt.
And we'll continue with this in a bit. But so like this is the apologetic trope, right? The hardened atheist. Michael Beverly's picking up what I'm putting down.
Mm-hmm.
Once an atheist and set out to disprove the Bible is code and dog whistle. Come on.
Yeah.
And this guy
just means someone who was brought up under a Christian hegemony, didn't really care about going to church much, didn't really care about theology that much, and then eventually just came back to Christianity. Yeah. That's what that's code for. Because I haven't yet found people who didn't have that exact background that are saying that. Well, I was an atheist, and then you ask them what an atheist was, and they go, I hated God. No. That's not how that works.
Yeah. And I think
you don't believe in.
I think Paula G is on point here too, as well, right? Like this isn't, and this is the I mean, there's the two problems that I have with this. Is this trope, the hardened atheist, the hardened skeptic who, overcame all the critical obstacles to get into the fold, to get into the faith. Come on, guys, this is not.
Lee Strobel, who literally again grew up in church, so.
Lee Strobel, Josh McDowell, J. Warner Wallace, and
McDowell,
maybe
son of Sean McDowell. Like,
No, you got that
on.
wrong. You mixed that up. Sean McDowell is the son of Josh.
Oh, Sean
McDowell.
is sorry. Sean's
Yeah,
the kid.
no.
Josh McDowell's the dad.
But it's still.
I get all my apologists confused.
Yeah, it's easy to do that, but this is not compelling to anyone, I don't think, outside of the fold. Michael Beverly says, I've been offering money for one atheist skeptic scholar who converted by this method to come to be interviewed. Does not exist. And this has been this is a consistent thing, right? But let's talk a little bit though about who C.S. Lewis was. C.S. Lewis was an intellectual. He was an academic. He grew up in a, as Vish pointed out, he grew up in a Christian hegemony, but was not, did not identify as a Christian beyond the cultural trappings. He was a student at the University of Oxford and then eventually became a professor of English at the University of Oxford. He was, I believe, he was mostly inspired by philosophical and particularly like philosophical fiction and prose and narrative. He was a good friend of the very famous J.R.R. Tolkien, who created the Lord of the Rings universe, and was also a very deeply devoted Christian. And it was through these experiences, as far as I'm aware, that C.S. Lewis actually came to faith. It had nothing to do with discovering the historical veracity of the claims of the Bible, or coming to learn that the Bible is the most historically accurate book on the planet, which it is not. I'm not even sure how one conducts such a measurement. What does that even mean? The most historically accurate book. So, and importantly as well, and this is something that I find myself often saying or repeating, having a PhD and being a professor at the University of Oxford does not qualify you to possess expertise in all things. Lewis, C.S. Lewis, that's his name. Sorry, I had a mind moment. Lewis was a philosopher, and he was a literary critic. He was a professor of English. He, as was the case, a high level liberal arts education in England in the 1920s and 30s required matriculation in the classics, in Greek and Latin, maybe Hebrew. I'm not entirely sure on that, but certainly Greek and Latin, as well as the Romance languages, German, French, Italian. So Lewis was able to read the New Testament in Greek. This does not mean that he was a trained historian or that he had the kind of relevant expertise that one would need to effectively weigh the critical claims of the New Testament insofar as its merits are as an historical document and within the wider milieu of Greco-Roman literature. So whether or not Lewis deserves credit for making an intellectual decision to follow Jesus and to become a Christian, I think we also need to be careful on how we understand that relative to the Bible, what it is, its history, and its meaning. All right. I think maybe just continue it for a bit, and we'll see where we get to.
Revealed differently than what you were taught. You know, like, did you kind of tell yourself, I'm going on a quest, like searching for truth without like a set conclusion to prove Christianity, knowing that it could go either way? Am I making sense?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a bit of an unusual household in that my mom grew up in India, and my parents when I was younger. I was born in Pakistan, and I spent a portion of my childhood in Jordan. I grew up in majority Muslim countries and surrounded by majority Muslim environments. And we had, you know, a copy of the Quran in the room. In fact, we had the Bhagavad Gita and the Book of Mormon, and you know, for a little while, other documents in our house. These were things that my parents, although they never verbally said, these Christianity is true, therefore these are not forbidden, these are not verboten. You know, the truth, capital T truth, of the reality of the world we behold can stand up against scrutiny and investigation. And I did do a great deal of that as a kid. My dad is a historian as well. He has a doctorate, and I grew up on him, you know, reading the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. But at the exact same time, the reason why I actually went to university with full intention of going into the police force, but it was interactions with Muslims and Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and atheists, and accusations against the credibility of the Bible, which actually piqued my interest.
Do you need to say something?
They would say things that I said that I thought, you know, if that's true, of course that undermines what I believe. I believe that Jesus is God incarnate. If I can't trust the Gospels as reliable first century eyewitness testimony, then I might as well throw all of this away, because
all due respect, I'm still waiting for any evidence that that census that people should go out to the ancestral home of their forefathers ever happened. Just let me know when y'all dig that up. I'll keep my porch light on for you.
Thanks, Vish.
Oh wait, it didn't? Wait, that's fake? Huh. Oh well, I guess I'm just gonna believe it anyway. What do you got, Kip?
I'm not gonna say anything. Listen, I'm not. Well, I don't know. Like yeah, this is tough, right? Because I think we're all prone to this. Like, we're all prone to what's the word I'm looking for? We're all prone to reinforcing our own deeply held ideas. And when you invest,
at no point am I trying to talk people out of their religious beliefs. If you want to believe it, go for it. Live your best life. If you're happy and fulfilled, awesome. I'm actually happy for you. But it's one of these things, like separating what you emotionally feel to be true versus like what we have documented from history, which doesn't line up with that. At least be honest and say, yeah, we don't really have any evidence from this, but you know what? I'm a Christian anyway. Okay, cool. But just be honest. Like, that's where I kind of get irritated, is that people kind of take the all or nothing approach. It's either all true or it's not true at all. And it's like, no, that's not how history works. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, it's exactly. But I'll just complete my thought, and then let's continue. I guess I wanted to say, look, we're all prone to this. We all fall in love with our own ideas. And I would say that holds, I suspect, even more true when it comes to matters of faith and deeply held religious convictions, to the point where these can be some of the most difficult blind spots in our thinking to overcome, right? And I don't know the reason for why some people don't move on or
hey, that's none of my business.
It is not. Exactly. It's none of mine either.
Somebody says, you seriously think we don't have evidence of the census that required people to go to their ancestral homeland? Yeah, we don't actually have any evidence that ever happened. There's none. Literally none. Not even an oblique. Like, oh, if you bend and stretch it really, 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 really far. No, it's zero. So, yeah, no. Anyway, again, it doesn't mean you have to stop being a Christian. That's not what that means. We're just saying, hey, that one particular claim is not evidenced. So,
you might be right.
Unfortunately,
too. Maybe I do.
That's just projection.
Maybe I do have blind spots, and maybe I do have biases, but I'm also someone who knows this material exceptionally well. And it's not like these are the questions that I continue to have about it in terms of my own historical obsession with it. It's not like these are questions that I work through easily or quickly. I've done the work. I've done the work. So
you spent a lot of time and money doing
I certainly did.
right?
I certainly did.
Yeah.
But let's continue.
Okay.
I'm not going to believe a lie, even if it's a convenient lie. And so it was actually the exploration of eventually going into graduate college and then now in working on my Ph.D., the largest secular university in Canada, that got me thinking, okay, how do we investigate these things? What are the methodologies by which we go about to explore the origins and credibility of something like the Bible? And that investigation, with all due respect to Billy and the content you put out, has actually confirmed what I believe. You know, I'm dealing with the actual manuscripts. I travel to academic institutions, to other countries, and I look at these things and I read them. And it's a privilege to be able to learn languages like Greek and Coptic and Hebrew and Aramaic and dig into these things. And I think ultimately, I really appreciate what you said there, Mark, with your articulation of your personal relationship. And I think that's so important. But I think it's also important to remember that that relationship is based on something that's real and verifiable. And we can look into the evidence. You know, I have friends who are linguists, philologists, and historians. And when we look into these things and we talk with one another and we're discussing, we're constantly trying to falsify our theories, because that's what good history does. We're looking for the falsification. You don't go in, ideally, if you want to be a good historian, with trying to prove your original thesis. You go in and say, okay, what are the avenues that actually could disprove this? And then how do we engage with those in an appropriate and articulate manner? So what I believe is true, but I believe it based on the evidence of the actual documentation. You know, I've read a lot of the literature that you're talking about, Billy, the Enuma, Elish, the Atrahasis, the Bhagavad Gita, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I've read some of them in their original languages because I've tried to be a good historian and go back into the primary sources. Or if I can't, engage with people like my friends who are Assyriologists, who are philologists, and try to not just go off of a translation, but the original. And I think I've found largely the opposite of the conclusions that you have made, Billy. And I know that you are very passionate about what you talk about, and I respect that. I just think that the confidence might not actually be backed up by the reality of the evidence. So when we're looking at something like the Sinai Bible, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Barnabas, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Jesus' wife, these are things that actually have provenance that we can verify. And ultimately, I think the answers to the questions of the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of those things point to not just a different conclusion, but actually the opposite conclusion, and that Christianity is true.
Well, now
all right,
I'm glad you said that. So
pause it there.
Those three topics,
and maybe we should. I think I think maybe we need to talk a little bit about this, but maybe after this one, let's move ahead to point 10. So that's like 50, okay. 5005, right? But like, here's the thing, right? Wes is speaking to experts. Wes is working in the manuscripts. He's working with the primary text. He's gone through the comprehensive examinations and passed them. He's nearing the point of completion of his dissertation, which might be the most difficult, rigorous academic project that he ever undertakes. They're not easy. He has done the work, and I believe him when he says that he has these conversations with his colleagues, and that as a group, as a collective, that's what we do in research communities. Is we push ideas and we investigate our ideas and we challenge one another with our ideas. But I think what he's not telling you here, is that the rest of the people, the rest of his conversation partners at the University of Toronto, his research partners and his colleagues, are not approaching all the same conclusions that he is. Like, it's not it's been good enough for him, right? It's been good enough for him.
Mm-hmm.
And as Vish pointed out, I don't know we don't know how he squares that circle, but it was one that I couldn't.
Yeah.
I
and
did.
however he does
the,
it, honestly, I don't care. It's not relevant to my life. That's just for him and his own personal edification. I'm not going to try to talk him out of it. So, yeah, it's one of these things where like people don't really realize that history is not done the same way as something like mathematics or biology. And we talk about evidence and proof in a very like casual way. That's not the way that historians or mathematicians or biologists use them.
Yeah.
So when we talk about proof is for alcohol and mathematics. Okay, when you're talking about biology and history and things like that, you have a body of evidence and facts, and you need to let those lead you to a conclusion. You don't pick the conclusion first and then go looking for things that fit it. You let the evidence and the facts lead you to the most likely scenario, which is what biology does, which is what history does. And the complication with history is that unlike DNA that we can, unpack and study and look at and microscopically analyze, history is very biased because the people who record it have intrinsic biases. So the more sources of a thing you have, the more likely you are to reach a reasonable conclusion based on what likely happened. They always say like the truth is somewhere in the middle. But again, when you talk about truth with a big T, that's a philosophical and a religious and a mystical, category. History doesn't deal with big T truth. That's not what it's doing.
Nope.
So this idea that you can just read a bunch of the different texts and find spiritual T truth, that's not how that works. So again, it's none of my business how Wes squares his, primary source literature work and his religion. I don't care. As long as his work is good, I don't really care what his religion is or isn't, because it's not relevant. So he's a PhD candidate. He's probably, based on his showing here, I would say that he's very likely to defend his thesis successfully. So hopefully, we'll be able to congratulate him when he gets that done. But yeah, it's one of those things where people who are used to operating in emotional and faith with a big F spheres don't like when you explain, hey, the way that this field works isn't the way that your mystical spiritual conclusions work, and that irritates them because there's friction there, and that's fine. Again, that people's personal beliefs, that's none of my business. I really don't care. I'm not interested in talking anybody into or out of it. I'm just like, I really wish that some people who are doing the work of apologetics would be more honest when they don't have corroborating evidence or corroborating accounts of the things that they're saying is definitely objectively true. Like, that gets really frustrating.
Yep. And Asher's Orchard, no, I'm not a Freemason.
No, that's just a turn phrase.
But listen, when you asked that question, you made me very happy because now I have Ghost's Square Hammer going through my head. So that's great.
Oh.
We would play it for y'all, but then, this whole stream would get totally demonetized. So I'm going to recommend to you that when the stream is over, everyone go listen to Square Hammer. Now but I got to say something else here about what Wes said about manuscripts and how he has the privilege to look at the manuscripts, which really helps him to validate the quality of his faith and I guess the historical truthfulness of it. And this is a point where I think some people have this picture in their head, and it may or may not align to the historical reality. The fact of the matter is, he's got those beautiful homemade facsimiles behind him. He's talked a little bit about manuscripts like P1, P66, Codex Sinaiticus. I see there on his shelf. Look, everyone, look on the bottom shelf. He's got the little one there.
Oh yeah, the little small fragment, just over shoulder.
He's got the world champion P52, the famous John Rylands papyrus. This is my John Rylands papyrus puzzle that I picked up at Deansgate, which is where it permanently lives, in the library at the university where I went to school. But these manuscripts, excuse me, P66 is a copy, an almost complete copy of the entire Gospel of John, which is amazing. That's incredible. And I think it's probably late 2nd century or early 3rd. I don't do a lot of work with New Testament manuscripts, so I'm not the guy to ask dating questions. But think about that. So it's like 200 AD. The one that I showed you, P52, the world champion, the oldest of all New Testament manuscripts. That's it, right? Like, you can see it on his shelf in the background. It's the tiny one. It's small. It's, 2 sides of a single page of John. I believe it's chapter 15. I think it's the scene of Jesus before Pilate. That's it. It dates to probably somewhere in the ballpark of 150 AD. My friend Brent Nongbury, who is at MF Norwegian School of Theology and is, in my opinion, probably one of the leading scribal experts, epigraphers in Greek manuscripts, has said that he thinks it's probably closer to late 2nd century than mid 2nd century. And then everything beyond that is probably later. Now think about that. These our manuscripts of the New Testament don't even get within a century, 100 years of the life of Jesus. And so while I have all the confidence that we can use the manuscripts to reconstruct the text of the New Testament, I don't extend that confidence to the historical veracity of the text of the New Testament. And what I mean by that is the literature itself. I have ideas about, when things were written and under what circumstances, but guys, we can't use the manuscripts to show us that stuff. We just can't. I work with better stuff. I work with the Dead Sea Scrolls, which
that's not biased at all.
Which are our oldest biblical manuscripts, and this is the situation there as well, right? The oldest manuscripts among the Dead Sea Scrolls. So these are the oldest of biblical manuscripts, date to the late 3rd century BCE. So we're talking like 280 maybe BCE. So just before, a few decades before the emergence of the Hasmonean regime, the revolt that occurred between the Jews and the Seleucids in the 160s. So we have stuff that actually predates that, which is pretty amazing. But again, like, these are far removed from the purported times, at least, of many of the texts that these manuscripts tell stories from or contain. So I'm going to say this again, right? The manuscripts themselves, the documents themselves, are useful. They're super useful to a point, but beyond that point, we've got ideas, and that's about it. So it's like I got another super chat here, and then I think let's jump ahead, Vish, to oh yeah, we already jumped ahead to 5005, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's read the super chat, and then we will. I pulled it up. It's okay.
Okay.
Emergency Moto, thank you very much for the $10. Do you disagree with the late Michael Heiser's view that the image of God is the giving humanity the divine authority over all other created things? If so, linguistically, where was he in error? No, I think he's right about that. However, I think that he probably also, and I'll be honest, I haven't read Heiser on this. I don't read a lot of Heiser, but I suspect that based on the bits of Heiser that I have read, I suspect that this is the tack that he takes, and I would disagree with him in how he would choose to de-emphasize the physicality of this picture, which I think is of critical importance to the writer of Genesis chapter 1. I think it's very significant to the writer of Genesis chapter 1 that we are created, as he says, to look like what the gods look like. That's what it means. All right. I hope everyone's having fun still. I hope you're all enjoying the stream. There's still a whole bunch of you here, which is pretty amazing. Thank you so much for hanging out with us this afternoon. Let's next. I wanted to spend some time talking about things that occur in this exchange, and I'll encourage everyone as well. Please go over to Wes's channel and watch the whole thing. I was unable to get through everything. Again, I gotta confess, a lot of it I just don't care about. But go watch the whole thing. Show him some love. He has performed a service for us. But let's move forward to hear Wes and Billy talk about first.
All right, no more preamble.
First Enoch.
There's a lot of crazy stuff in the Bible too that you can prove it's been written, but it also takes some faith because you can't physically see where there was wars between demons and angels and stuff fighting in the heavens. So there's tons going on. Obviously, could any of those have been like from what you've discovered or how people have written it? Do you think those could have been demons or angels?
I don't believe in demons or angels at all.
You don't believe in them at all?
No, I don't believe in demons and angels. When
okay,
you read,
hold on, Vish.
coming down in the Book of Enoch.
I'm with Billy on this one. I also do not believe
the Book of Enoch, and I'm like, which book? Because there's like
demons
3
and angels. Yeah,
or 4.
Yeah.
And anyone goes, what is? You shouldn't participate in that conversation.
Coming down, the first thing he does is teach people how to make knives and swords so you can cut a man's head off. You read, you see these.
See, he doesn't think angels and demons did it, but then he quotes from all these other ancient sources that say the gods, quote unquote, did that. And I'm like, who do you think the gods are? Like, what's the differentiation between levels of
this is so this is yeah. So this is the thing I learned in watching this, and I'll be honest, I didn't pay any attention at all to Billy Carson, like not at all, until I saw him on a Bad Science Sunday. They did a review of one of his videos on Bad Science Sunday. Shout out, go watch Bad Science Sunday on Maya Atkinson's channel.
Melchizedek, which is an amazing username.
Yes, you won the internet today.
You won the internet. Says, I don't believe in angels and demons, but then Billy says God is Satan and also aliens.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is what I learned. I never seen anything. I never heard anything about Billy Carson before I watched Bad Science Sunday a few months back, and then this, right? And I think I caught bits of him. I caught bits of him on the Danny Jones podcast.
you gotta start rolling in the right circles, man. If you don't watch Professor Dave take down Billy Carson and Terrence Howard, you are missing out. It is savagery.
Okay. Yeah. So, but anyways, Danny Jones asked me about him, and I knew a little bit, but this is it, right? This is all I've known about Billy Carson, but I think I learned just kind of watching this exchange he had with Wes that he seems to think that all the biblical texts, like the mythology within the biblical text, that these are myths about actual historical events and real people that have been encoded, right? Like angels and demons are actually like kings or aliens, or like this is all very tangible and real to him, which is it's just wild to me. Like I'm sorry, I just don't know. I don't know how to get there. I just don't.
Hey, you know what? Let him cook. Maybe he'll get there.
Okay. Where's that in the book of Enoch?
In the book of Enoch, Azazel. He comes down.
Where's that in the book of Enoch? Is it? The only reason I ask is because there are two Enochs, first Enoch and second Enoch, and only first Enoch is
thank you, Wes.
Historical amalgamation.
Thank you.
Okay. And then you analyze the fact that these angels are having sex, they're getting drunk. These are just people.
Whoa. Where are angels getting drunk?
Angels party. They go. They hang out with people. They go to war with people. They put on their outfits and go to war with people.
Where are they getting drunk though?
They get married. Okay, whatever that means. But they're having.
They don't get married.
Okay.
In fact, Scripture says that angels can't get married.
Merry Christmas.
Not married. Mary. MERRY. But the point that I'm making here is when you start to really analyze what these angels are doing, and you start to analyze how many people are dying in the biblical text, you start to say, well, how many people did Satan actually kill?
How many people do we think died? Because it does not talk about that. If he's referring to the flood, we're not given any concept of how many people are in that area, much less on the earth. Where's he getting that? Anyway, that's just an open question.
Yep. And when you start doing the tally on the numbers, God's doing most of the killing in the Bible. It's not the devil that's doing all the killing. And God says in Isaiah, I created the good and I created the evil. Do what I say at the Lord. So he's saying that he's doing the good and the evil.
That's because the devil is a much later, Christian concept.
Yes.
What is he?
Very.
What's going on?
Very true. Really but Vish, I think let's be fair. He's also not wrong. The devil is a development of a figure from Hebrew mythology called the Satan, the accuser, who was a member of the court of God. He was a member of the court of the gods, and
Divine council.
I gotta say, he doesn't do a lot ever in the story. So I mean that's other
people function as a Satan. So what?
That happens. It does happen. But
anyway.
Yeah.
Let me just keep going.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
My personal opinion on this whole thing, I just let me get this out because we keep going over the same rhetoric over and over again. My personal opinion is that the biblical text is a good book. Like I've said, I've got videos. My number one video on Twitter has me saying this. It's good text because if you actually apply some of the information that's in the Bible, you can get a good result, like you have done, Mark.
Right.
Maybe skip the sexism and the patriarchy and the slavery, though, and the genocide, maybe in the adultery tests. I recommend against those.
Here's the thing, right? And I think, I also think that the Bible is a good book, but I think Billy and Mark mean something different than what I mean.
Yeah.
Right. In my opinion, what makes a book good is one that successfully accomplishes what it set out to do. Right. They're good novels are ones that entertain and you can't put down. If Wes's dissertation is good, and it'll become a book, it's one that is provocative, interesting, and persuasive in making its case. So
trying
these
to think,
are
though, because I've got House of Leaves sitting in my room right now, and I'm like, that one's not gonna fit neatly into any category.
Sure, right? But I don't think that's what they're talking about, right? Like they're saying,
there's a different
and this is
conversation.
where, look, I think the Bible is good, because it's full of a lot of really great literature.
Oh yeah.
But come on, like,
and hey,
it's not.
Let's talk about the fact that it preserves ancient Levantine erotica. That's also something.
That's also good.
We don't talk about that enough. Like, hey,
no, we certainly don't. But this is like, I don't think I ever,
like, it wasn't just the Greco-Roman world and the Egyptian world that were horny. Okay.
Sure enough. But and to help Vishanti drag her mind out of the gutter here, let's get us back on track. Look, you just totally you totally distracted me with the ancient Jewish porn. Way to go. But I think it's important to say, books on their own, for the most part, can't be like, I don't think they contain any moral value, right?
Yeah, I don't think we should be taking our morals from Iron Age texts or even Hellenistic texts, to be honest with you, or any text, like,
right?
Like, because those people aren't living right now. Why should I listen to them? That's just ancient peer pressure, man.
Yes.
Anyway, let's go ahead, because we can get through a little more of this.
I struggle with I know I want you to finish your thought. Go ahead.
So because you can get a good result, but there's a lot of misinformation in the Bible. There's a lot of false information that's copied from ancient text. And if you go by that text, all of a sudden you end up with 400 years of slavery. You end up with abuse. You end up with divide and conquer tactics that separate people. You end up with people thinking that they're the chosen ones and they're the chosen people. And we've been promised this promised land so we can eradicate another race of people because this is our land.
Billy, hold on a sec, Fish.
Like, people that
Billy, those are all things that are in the text. Like, are you not aware of that? Like, it almost seems like he's got this idea that there are two Bibles, and the one is the right one, and then there's this other one that's the bad one or the corrupted one, but they're all still both in there. And this is part of the problem, right?
This is something that I don't know if you were at this panel, but like, listening to people weaponize the rhetoric that's in there has caused a lot more damage, because the narrative in Joshua about like the genocidal conquest, that historically did not happen, especially as described. Like, a lot of the cities like Ai and Jericho were uninhabited when those people and the narratives were being written about them. So yeah, we need to talk about the dangers of rhetoric 100%. But if you want to talk about the people who have historically weaponized those texts in order to cause the most damage, can we stare at Christian hegemony? Because
it's a thing.
New World colonization, the transatlantic slave trade, that's just going to get you started. That doesn't even get you into the like modern era. So again, these are things you need to wrestle with. You can't just take everything at face value and go, "Oh, it's all good."
Yep.
That's not.
Yep.
That's
you
not
know, there's a lot of ways to there's a lot of ways to, and it's not hard to use the Bible in order to legitimate terrible things.
Yeah.
Is the message.
And I think
in as much as you
religion,
are able,
any philosophy should really push back against anyone weaponizing their text to cause harm.
Yes.
That's my personal
But here's the
opinion. And there's no such thing as Judeo-Christianity. That's just something people want to say when they want to legitimize Christianity. There's nothing Jewish about Christianity except for the very initial group of people that started it. That's it.
Okay. All right, let's go.
All right, let's get through some more of this.
That want to go on the papal inquisitions and torture and kill and murder over 80 million people. You have the American Holocaust, 111 million indigenous natives slayed. You have all this going on because of this text, which is set up so contradictory throughout its path across time. You get into the New Testament, slavery is still being condoned in the New Testament.
Was it?
Honor thy slave master as you would honor God or Jesus, it says. I believe. So
well, it doesn't. It doesn't say that.
It did say, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, as sincerity of heart as you would obey Christ." That's
before we go
obey your earthly masters with respect.
Before we get to the slavery stuff here, because
we got to get Josh on.
I do think it's something. Well, he's unavailable, so you're stuck with me. But I think it's important that we do get there. But before we do, I also think I need to say something because they kind of glossed over it fairly quickly. First Enoch. And it was great.
Yeah.
It was excellent that Wes pointed out that this situation and the picture is a lot more complicated than what Billy is presenting. But then I don't know if you caught it, but he said something, and he misheard him because Billy Carson said that in the Book of Enoch, angels were getting merry, as in they were getting drunk, which is wrong. But Wes heard him say they got married, and then he said no, they didn't, and then he said he said that angels can't get married because
univocal voice.
Did you catch that, everyone?
Univocal voice.
Those who aren't in on the joke, he meant to say univocal.
Yes.
But he put the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
He did. But I think this is an important point, right? In the Book of Enoch, so much as anybody got married, the angels sure did. I'll remind you. So the first Book of Enoch and the earliest parts of the first Book of Enoch are called the Book of the Watchers, and they date probably to the 3rd century BCE. The Book of the Watchers is very much the development in there is basically riffing off of this rather briefly told story that appears at the beginning of Genesis chapter 6, where it's the sons, and it's where the sons of the gods come down, or the sons of God come down, and the text literally says they took, lakach is the verb, which is the verb that you use to indicate whatever this is, and whatever this thing is that we call marriage, presented in the Old Testament. So that's the
Jennifer
verb.
Bird, wherever Dr. Jennifer Bird is right now, is screaming and doesn't know why.
Yeah. So yes, they're taking the human women and they're having sex with them, and this is what the first Book of Enoch, the Book of the Watchers, is about. I'll just, I've got here one of the manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls preserves part of this story. This is 4Q202, 4Q Enoch B, and it begins like this. It happened that when in those days the son of men increased, pretty and attractive daughters were born to them. The watchers, the sons of the sky, saw them and lusted for them, and said to each other, let's go and choose out women from among the daughters of men and sire for ourselves sons. That's what marriage was, or coupling was in the ancient world. That's what it is.
I'm gonna take a time out. I'm laughing really, really hard at something right now.
All right.
Hang on. The chat's moving very quickly. But Shanti talked about honest and non-biased investigation and goes scorched earth on known Christian hate propaganda. I'm sorry, did Christians not do the transatlantic slave trade and the Inquisition that murdered a bunch of my ancestors? Did that not happen? Are we going to pull out the no true Scots and believe real Christians? Like, okay, sure. Cry. Anyway, resume.
So yeah, that's angels taking women and entering into something that certainly was not in any way dissimilar to normal human coupling relationships between men and women. And I think he's glossing over something in this exchange too, and that is the way in which, from the time in which these earliest texts were written, the earliest of the Hebrew texts were written up until the time of the Second Temple period, when a lot of this literature started to, become much more popular and reflected upon by Jewish scribes and theologians. There is a shift that takes place, where in antiquity, the ancient Israelites certainly believed that God was not alone and singular, that he was surrounded by his family, that God had sons, that the children of God were also these other deities. That's who the sons of God are in Genesis chapter 6. That's who the sons of God are in Deuteronomy 32, or in Psalm chapter 82. That's just who they are. Over time, these came to be understood as angels. But importantly, I think to make here is that what Wes is doing is taking a univocal approach to the text. And I would consider that unhistorical. I would consider that unscholarly. When we approach the text as historians and philologists, we're digging into the composite nature of this literature, its development, its interpretation, its reception over time, the way it changed.
And to clarify for the chat, because some folks are real mad, the text of Enoch is describing how they saw angels and how they saw creatures and beings in the supernatural realm. We're not trying to say angels definitely can or can't get married. No, we're referencing the text because that is a historical view of how they saw these entities. And we'll read it if we want to, Michael X. If you don't like people reading things, then maybe don't listen.
You're missing out, dude, if you're not reading Enoch.
Yeah, it's a very fun
amazing
fanfic
text.
of Genesis 6.
It's tons of fun. People should absolutely read Enoch because it's fun, and stop taking it so seriously.
Yeah. And again, it's when you talk about these books, you can talk about them as literature, and you can talk about them as a way to analyze what the people of that time period thought about these issues. You're not,
I guarantee you,
going, oh, this is definitely true, and I'm talking about angels as if they actually exist. Why don't you just discuss it like it's literature?
Yeah. And I guarantee you guys, as deeply devoted an evangelical Christian as Wes Huff is, I think he would tell you the same thing. Go and read First Enoch because it's fun.
It is fun.
It's good.
It's entertaining.
It's good. So yes, please go read it. Go read all the things. So let's continue. Because we have to get through this. We have to get through this
with sincerity in your heart, just as you would obey Christ. So it does say that Ephesians 6:5, but there's so many aspects. That
stuff is what...
And what is the context of what Ephesians is saying? So I think this is very important because we don't take text in isolation. So
just a quick drive-by comment. You need to learn how the canon, quote unquote, was created, because there's multiple canons and those are shifted over time. And if you think there's only 66 books in the Bible, you're going by a cost-saving measure that Protestants latched onto. Hashtag Deuterocanon rights. Also, the Ethiopian Tawahedo canon is like the largest of any Christian community, which is pretty cool because they're pretty much the only ones that preserve the entire text of Enoch, which is pretty awesome. So, shout out Ethiopian Tawahedo Church. Anyway.
Nice.
Within Scripture, and this is why all the abolition movements throughout history have only been Judeo-Christian movements. There's never been an abolition movement.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Wow. I'm gonna clip that out later. That needs to be a whole stream on its own.
Yeah.
Saying that all abolition moments are Judeo-Christian. I don't even know where to start with that, but I'm gonna unpack it later.
that wasn't Christian. And actually, there's the recent work by historian Tom Holland, not the Spider-Man actor, different Tom Holland, but his recent Dominion highlights this fact very well. This is not a Christian, but in it, he shows that going right back into the antiquity with the Cappadocian Fathers was the first abolition movement, and then into the British and the American abolition movements. These were fundamentally Christian movements run by Christians because of the idea that when Paul, who wrote that letter to Ephesians, says, "In Christ there is no slave nor free," he's breaking down those barriers. So
he wasn't. The New Testament doesn't forbid or abolish slavery. These they really need to have some conversations with Dr. Josh and Dan McClellan.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah. This is going to get real frustrating for me real fast.
Ephesians, when he says slaves obey your masters, he's operating on the socioeconomic context of what he's going on. And he's saying, hey, we have slaves and we have free people. Okay. If you're a believing slave, if you're a slave who believes in Jesus as the Messiah, be equitable in how you are living your life. Reflect Christ accurately. And that's a movement that he is fundamentally working towards that eventually starts to completely.
If they meant to undo slavery, why did it take like 1800 years? Why is it that Mexico abolished slavery like 40 years before the United States bothered, and America had to have a civil war about it? So explain to me why it took this long. If it was so obvious. It's so obvious, you guys.
All right. Look, okay. So he's mentioned a bunch of things here that I think need to be addressed. Galatians, first of all, he cited Galatians chapter 3, verse 23. There is neither Jew nor Greek, nor male nor female, nor slave nor free. All are one or united in Christ. I'm citing this off of memory. It's relatively close to that. This is often cited by Christian apologists as a defense of the idea, the mistaken idea, that the New Testament ethic is somehow one that is opposed to slavery. And I would just say that is false, and that is also not a particularly scholarly position. Jennifer Glancy, a brilliant New Testament scholar, has written extensively on slavery in the early church, slavery in the New Testament and the earlier church, and this is just not correct. And my good friend and colleague, Dr. Joshua Bowen, has also written. It's not a peer-reviewed book. It's a book that he wanted to make available to lay people.
Oh, that 700-page brick.
Yes, but it's thorough. It's thorough, right? It's large because he had to be thorough. But I'm just going to read a little bit of this because this is not his the New Testament and early Christianity is not that's not his sandbox. But he did write a little bit about it, and I'm going to read a bit about what a bit of what he says here, starting on page 207. The point of Galatians 3:28, it would seem, is to express unity. I'm going to start a little. I'm going to move up here a little bit and start a little bit above that, where he says that that Betts explains why scholars hold to the position that this is an irrelevant point, neither slave nor free. He says the overwhelming evidence in early and later Christianity seems to recommend only this second option available, that it was irrelevant, a view taken by most commentators. That Galatians 3:28 is not intended to do away with the social institution of slavery is clear for several reasons. First, the other two statements in the verse, neither Jew nor Gentile, and especially neither male nor female, can hardly be understood as doing away with such distinctions. Whatever one would argue concerning the attitude of the New Testament writers to the role and status of women, another topic entirely, it would be difficult to maintain that passages like 1 Corinthians 14:34-35 would allow the social distinction between men and women to be ignored. The point of Galatians 3:28, it would seem, is to express the unity that members of the body of Christ share by being in Christ. Scott McKnight writes, to be in Christ is to be in spiritual fellowship with him through God's Spirit. This is one way of defining what a Christian is, one who is in Christ. Although believers are now all united and equal in the eyes of God, having been baptized into Christ, this does not negate the reality of social and role distinctions between members of the referenced social groups, including slaves. Hector Avalos concludes, Galatians 3:28 was clearly meant solely to establish the reckoning of believers as Abraham's seed, regardless of their gender, ethnicity, or slave status. Other New Testament authors certainly did not see this passage as incompatible with having Christian slaves or ordering Christian slaves to serve their slave masters. Ephesians 5:24 or 6 verse 5. So the point here, I think that bears emphasis is this. In the New Testament, there really isn't, if there is any movement. It's good to see you, Satan. Always happy to have you around. If there is any movement at all towards the abolition of slavery, it is muted to the point of being microscopic and unseen at best within that particular cultural context. Look, I'm not saying, and I need people to hear this, I am not saying that Christianity did not have an enormous role to play in the abolition of slavery over time. But as Vishanti pointed out, it took a long time, guys. And it was not because, and because it's not like the church and Christendom at large was racing to deal with this and to get over it. So I want to point out, yes, slavery made a big contribution to the abolition of the slave trade eventually. But I think the biblical grounding for that movement, in my opinion, is often on the basis of just misunderstanding what these texts were about in their original context. And that's honestly kind of one of the beautiful things about the Bible, is that it is, even within its original context, and the history of the text itself can be extremely messy and unpleasant.
Man,
but the nice thing about it, just let me finish this, Fish.
Okay.
The wonderful thing about the Bible is that it is as malleable as it is, that we can take these texts and we can reshape them, and we can reconstitute them in ways that are productive. Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's a really encouraging thing, and it's a relief to learn that the New Testament just abolished slavery by Paul saying there's neither slave nor free or male or female, so that Christians can stop pissing their pants about gender issues now. Yeah. That's really awesome. How progressive. I'm really glad to hear that.
I'm going to recommend that maybe it's coming up on 3 hours. Let's finish. Okay. Let's finish this, and let's try to let just Wes get through this point to
his
the end.
Apologetics.
And then I've got some things to say, okay? And then we'll finish up the super chats and we'll get out of here.
All right, sounds like a plan.
Take out the legs from the slave
argue,
movement in general.
I would be.
Oh, look, there's a break.
Yeah, Mark, but what I'm saying is, I think we're missing a big point here. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the Bible is written by people, men who are extremely flawed. And the evidence of that is what they did, what they took the information that's in that biblical text and what they did with it globally to other human beings, and how they even wrote about it in the Bible, how they enslaved and tortured people in the biblical text. So in that case, even in the book of Deuteronomy, which is one of the most brutal books out there, where everything is given okay to rape women, kill children, if one person talks against your Lord, go to that town and kill the whole town, burn the town down.
So brutal.
It's just
in the
too
Old
much. Like I
Testament.
said,
turns people into salt.
The killing in the Bible is not being done by Satan. That's why I don't care. I don't believe in demons and all this other kind of stuff. Moses goes to the top. He talks to God. He gets his tablet. The first commandments are, thou shalt not kill. He comes down. As soon as he sees the people making a golden calf, he kills most of them. It's just like, come on.
Let me just say this.
Most of them, he only killed some of them, but okay.
Keep going.
So the most quoted verse of the Bible in the Bible is a version of Exodus 34:6, which fundamentally describes who God is, that he's compassionate and loving, full of grace and mercy and abounding in steadfast love. And so, in fact, if you read the book of Jonah, the beef that Jonah has with God, the reason why he doesn't want to go to Nineveh is because he believes that God is so loving that if he tells the Ninevites to repent and they repent, God is going to forgive them. So fundamentally, we have the picture of God consistently throughout the Bible, both in the Old and New Testaments, as being a God who is rich in love and mercy and abounding in steadfast kindness.
Pause it for a second.
So
I got to say something quick here.
So rich in mercy that he flooded the planet.
Listen. This is a picture we have of the God of the Bible, but it's not the only picture we have of the God of the Bible. That's really important. There are many different perspectives of who God is and how he behaves within the biblical text, because a lot of different people wrote the Bible. Thank you, Simone. All right, keep going.
Okay.
Onto God who is just. And just to speak very briefly to the slavery issue, I mean, Leviticus 25 condemns by death the man stealing. So stealing someone.
Yes, but it tells you that you
no.
Vishati,
let it go.
And the fact that the Ten Commandments are prefaced with, you are a nation who was slaves. You know, I'm the God of Israel who brought you out of Egypt. So there's a fundamental difference, and there's lots of literature on this. I would encourage people to read my friend Paul Copan's book, Is God a Moral Monster? He's written some excellent stuff. He's also written on Did God Command Genocide in the Old Testament? He's a leading expert in the field of a comparative analysis of ancient Near Eastern war literature. And so there are very coherent explanations for these things, and that slavery within ancient Israel was very, very different from what slavery around the ancient Near East was like. And on top of that, once again, when abolition movements happen, what's that? Sorry, Billy?
I said slavery continued on throughout the Bible with no problems.
Yep.
But it was always undergirded by the fact that this was not the ideal, that this was something that should not be done. And even slavery within ancient Israel was fundamentally different than slavery around the ancient Near East. This is not a contested fact. You can look at the scholarship of individuals like Wright, who's written extensively on this. He's an ancient Near Eastern ethicist. And there's vast difference between the law codes in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers, and something like the Code of Hammurabi, which puts people on a tier system and gives different punishments depending on where they are within society. That's not true in ancient Israel. If you were a king and you stole somebody and you sold them into slavery, they would punish you by death.
All right.
But when you take a look at the biblical text, and you start
I get it. This is like 700 pages. That's a lot. But the first 300 are actual discussion about slavery, and the back is literally all the other contemporary slave laws, like the Code of Hammurabi, for instance. And just a fun fact here, the Code of Hammurabi only let you keep slaves for 3 years. The Bible lets you have them for 6.
Those would be the pledges, Vish. And
yeah, we need to have conversations about that. But yeah, I can't just listen to someone spell. It was so much better and moral, and it was so totally different, guys. It wasn't. It was on par. In a few areas it was better, in a few areas it was worse. It wasn't some unique little unicorn.
So this is where the apologetics comes bleeding through, right? I have a number of things to say here. First of all, the mistake Wes brings up, Leviticus 25. He meant to quote Exodus 21 verse 6. I'm just going to pull it up here and read it, and because I think we need to say some things about this. So Exodus 21 verse 6. Sorry, 16, not 6. I think it's 16. Or is it 6? Yeah, I think it's 16. Yeah, 21:16. Whoever kidnaps a man, whether he has sold him or is still holding him, shall be put to death. So this is an instruction to not kidnap people. it's important to point out that this is not a unique instruction in the Bible. This is virtually every ancient Near Eastern culture had a law on the books that you're not allowed to kidnap people. But listen, this is not an instruction to not enslave people, because you don't acquire your slaves by kidnapping, as a rule. Ordinarily, you would go to a market and buy your slaves, as they did in ancient Israel and every other place throughout the ancient Near East. They acquired foreign slaves through war, capture. All those places in the Old Testament where it talks about plunder and booty and actually numbers people among the rest of the animals and the goods that are taken in wars, those are slaves, guys. Those are slaves. But I think we know for a fact that the way in which Wes is reading this text as a condemnation of slavery is wrong, because within the Bible itself, the Bible, that's one of the other really interesting things, and one of the fun things about the Bible is that the Bible is also very often interpreting itself, right? So this law in Exodus chapter 21 verse 6, the writer of Deuteronomy in Deuteronomy 24 verse 7, I'm just going to pull this one up. He was dissatisfied with the ambiguity of this text and felt the need to provide some clarification. So the author of Deuteronomy said, if a man is found to have kidnapped a son of Israel, enslaving him or selling him, that kidnapper shall die. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst. You see what he did there? The writer of the book of Deuteronomy was figured that this passage in Exodus might be prone to misinterpretation, just as Wes has misinterpreted it. So he provided that clarifying point, right? Don't kidnap your fellow Israelites is what this text is intended today. And it's not just Deuteronomy. The Greek translation of the Hebrew texts, the Torah, texts themselves, it's probably something that took place in the 3rd century BCE. Maybe it took place over a little bit of a longer period of time. But in the 3rd century BCE, the Septuagint translator of Exodus chapter 21 verse 16 actually rendered this text to align with Deuteronomy. The Septuagint translator says, you shall not, anyone who kidnaps a fellow Israelite and tries to sell him shall be put to death. So no, this is not an instruction to avoid slavery. All right, he mentions a couple of scholars there. He mentions
quote?
Okay, what are you
Leviticus
quoting?
25. Leviticus 25, laws of Hammurabi 117.
I was going to finish up with Leviticus 25, 35 to 46.
And then I'll read the laws of Hammurabi after that.
Yeah. Okay. So Wes mentions Paul Copan, and he calls him a specialist or an expert or someone who works with comparative ancient Near Eastern war literature, conventions, ethics. That's what I heard. Is that what you heard, Vish? That's what I heard. So Paul Copan is an analytic philosopher. And as far as I know, he teaches philosophy, ethics, maybe comparative religion. He is not an ancient Near Eastern specialist. At least if he is, none of that qualification actually appears on any CV or bio of his that I have ever seen. So Paul Copan is not an authority in this field. Wes mentions Christopher Wright, who has written on this topic. I haven't read Christopher Wright. Josh is not a fan of Christopher Wright, as someone who has read pretty much everything on the topic. But I would recommend that, maybe Wes, you might want to consider reading a little bit more broadly. Bernard Jackson has written on this topic. Raymond Westbrook, I've already mentioned Jennifer Glancy. Candida Moss just wrote a great book.
Yeah.
About the enslavement of Christian scribes in the first centuries of the Common Era. And they're not saying, guys, all of these people are not saying what Christopher Wright said, or what Paul Copan said, or what Wes is saying now. Slavery was a real thing, and yes, it is absolutely endorsed and promoted within the biblical text, which is a big part of why it took 1800 years for people to get over it. So you want to read? Listen, I will read. I will read the laws of Hammurabi, Vish, and then I'm going to finish up with Leviticus 25.
Okay. Yeah, I like the way you're doing that.
All right.
This is Laws of Hammurabi 117. If an obligation is outstanding against a man and he sells or gives into debt service his wife, his son, or his daughter, they shall perform service in the house of their buyer or of the one who holds them in debt service for 3 years. Their release shall be secured in the 4th year.
There you go. 3 years for debt slaves in the Code of Hammurabi. Okay, so I'm going to finish this. So the one other thing that Wes mentioned, and then I think we're probably done with the video. But one other thing that Wes mentioned was that there is an ethic for freedom within the biblical text on the basis of this idea that Yahweh freed all the slaves of Israel. This is kind of the central event in the founding of the nation. This is the pivotal feature of Israelite identity in antiquity. And honestly, listen, he's not wrong about that particular point, but I think this too is something that people are prone to misunderstanding. So I'm going to read a chunk of text here from in Leviticus 25, starting in verse 35, and I'm going to read through to the end of verse 46.
You're going way back.
Yeah, I am, because it's important. If your kinsman, if your brother, being in straits, comes under your authority and you hold him as though a resident alien or a ger, let him live by your, is it a ger or is it it's a toshav, live as a toshav. Let him live by your side. Do not exact from him advance or accrued interest, but fear your God. Let him live by your side as your brother. Do not lend him your money and advance interest, or give him your food at accrued interest. I am Yahweh. I, Yahweh, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan, to be your God. So that's what he's talking about, is this constant recall by Yahweh to this event. I am Yahweh, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, who freed you. Oftentimes the text says, who freed you from the house of slaves. If your brother under you continues in straits and must give himself over to you, do not subject him to the treatment of a slave. He shall remain with you as a hired or bound laborer. He shall serve you only until the Jubilee year. That's the 49th year. Then he and his children with him shall go free of your authority. He shall go back to his own family and return to his own ancestral holding. Your brother, your fellow Israelite. That's important to keep in mind here, right? Why? Because those Israelites, those sons of Israel, Yahweh says they are my slaves, whom I freed from the land of Egypt. Why? Because they're mine, they're God's. They may not give themselves over to slavery because they belong to Yahweh. You shall not rule over him ruthlessly.
They are my slaves, yeah.
You shall not fear your God. Such male and female slaves as you may have, it is from the nations round about you that you may acquire male and female slaves, because the sons of Israel already belong to Yahweh. They're his slaves, so you can't own them. Your slaves have to come from outside, from other nations. You may also buy them from among the children of the alien residents among you, the Ger and the Toshavim, or from their families that are among you, whom they begot in your land. These shall become your property. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property for all time. Such you may treat as slaves. You may treat them as slaves. But as for your Israelite brothers, your fellow sons of Israel, no one shall rule ruthlessly over the other. And that word there that's translated to rule ruthlessly over the other, this is the same term that's used at the beginning of the book of Exodus to describe the condition of slavery under which the Israelites were subjected by the Egyptians. So listen, slavery.
Two things.
It's a thing.
If you go into debt slavery, the laws of Hammurabi are half as long. You serve 3 and get released in the 4th. The Hebrew Bible has serving for 6, released in the 7th. So that's literally twice as long as a debt slave. And that's only for people in like your own countrymen. And then, like, you have verse 46 saying, hey, if you acquire slaves from the foreign nations, you can actually pass those slaves down to your children as inheritance. So this idea that, oh, it was so much different back then. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't better, and it wasn't good. So you need to wrestle with these things and be honest, like, hey, this is what's going on. We don't have to follow this as an eternal moral binding principle. And yeah, this whole thing, like this book, it's called Did the Old Testament Endorse Slavery by Dr. Joshua Bowen. Highly recommend it.
Highly recommend it.
The first half of it is discussing all of this, and then the back half is literally all the contemporaneous laws from all the other nations in the area. So you got to get it. You really do. You really need to read about how it stacked up against other nations, because again, in some cases, it was pretty on par. A few instances would be better, a few were worse. And the proof is there. Like, you can read the text of those laws to see for yourself. So, no, Josh isn't lying. If you don't like what he's saying, well, too bad. Go learn Akkadian and do your own book.
Yep.
Anyway.
That's the way to do it. So, okay. So, let's finish up here. So, Wes, when you do come back, if you do come back to watch the rest of this, I just want to say, listen, first of all, well done. I mean, for the most part, in calling out a grifter like Billy Carson on his bullshit. It was a pleasure. Yeah. It was a delight to watch someone who's got training take on a pseudo historian like that, because it gets frustrating to see the ways in which history and literature and scholarship are manipulated to these sorts of ends. But I think on that point as well, I hope you hear my critique of some of your response here, and I hope you take it to heart. I think you, at a minimum, I think you could have done better to provide some added nuance in a few places. And I also, I just want to encourage you to maybe take care to learn a little bit more about some of these topics, such as slavery in antiquity, than before making public declarations about what such things look like. But honestly, let's I'm happy. Let's talk about some of this stuff in the future, if you're up for it.
I'm gonna issue a challenge to some of the butthurt folks in the chat. If you think I have a demon, use your Jesus powers to rebuke it.
Guys,
you can do that, right? You have enough faith, right? Faith of a mustard seed can move mountains, so rebuke it. I'll wait.
All right. But but honestly, and I hope everyone who watched the stream, I really hope that you see. I've been trying to be fair here, and I hope you can see that Wes and I are friends. I expect that he's going to take the criticism I issued in this video with the measure in which it was given. It's not like I think he's a bad guy. It's not like I think that that he's a terrible person or he's somebody that needs to. We just have some disagreements about things, right? So we'll leave it at that. I've got a few more super chats to get to, and then if you have questions, now's the time to get them in, because we're going to shut it down here in a few minutes. All right. Alpha Centurion. I don't know if you know this guy, Vish, but Alpha Centurion, he's a fun guy. He's Catholic, and he runs a small channel where he does like Catholic things, but he's pretty cool. Do you think dogma developed to protect Christians from charlatans and con men like Carson? Boy, God, dude, that's a really good question, and it's such a good question that now I'm like literally I'm racking my brain. The wheels are turning. I have no idea how to answer this question.
Catholic dogma? Or just dogma as a general concept?
I don't know. If you're still here, you could clarify. You could clarify that for us. But I think it's a great question, because as I'm reading this, it's an interesting question. Does dogma develop but yeah, I think actually, as I think through it, and I think I have to think through it a little bit more carefully, but I think you're probably right that people get entrenched in their ideas because the space for the multiplication, just dogma in general, I think, yeah, okay. So I think when the space for the the space for maintaining or promoting a variety of different ideas, when it becomes impossible to maintain that, then yeah, I think that's kind of how dogmas do develop. It's a very good point. And I'm going to think a lot more about that. But thank you for the question. I think it's very timely too. Heber Costa for 5. Do you know what kind of dollars those are, Vish? With the R on it?
Offhand, no, I can Google it.
All right, but thank you for those, whatever they are. Doesn't a lot of Christian mythology and metaphysical beliefs come from Enoch, and people think they come from the Bible? Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. There is definitely a strong crossover between a lot of the theology that appears in the book of Enoch, in others of the books of Enoch. This is why the early Christians loved the books of Enoch, which is why they continue to copy them.
Why they quoted it in Jude.
Listen, I read to you a copy of one of the books of Enoch in the original Aramaic from the Dead Sea Scrolls, but prior to the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, our only access to the books of Enoch came through the Christian manuscripts in which these texts were preserved, in Coptic predominantly, in Greek, in Ethiopic and Slavonic. I think maybe there was some Latin ones too, but predominantly Ethiopic then and Slavonic. So, but yes, Ge'ez, thank you. But that's like yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of shared ideas in there. I don't know if I would go so far as to say that Christianity got all these ideas out of the books of Enoch. I prefer to think of it as a shared milieu within. Judaism was a big tent in the first century. There was all sorts of different ideologies percolating. But thank you very much.
Oh, it's Brazilian. The Brazilian real.
Oh, is the AI. Okay.
Thank you,
pronounce it AI, by the way.
Hey,
I just had to I flagged this one because I know what this is. And I am very excited that Paul is teasing this for tomorrow. Josh and I have been working with Apologia for a while, for at least a month, maybe 6 or 8 weeks, on a monster video response on the topic of slavery in the Bible. So people really need to check that out and support Apologia. Domingo Aviles, thank you very much again for the $10 Canadian super chat. Is there a rule that plural nouns, used as abstractions lack the definite article, like in Exodus 20 verse 2? I ask because Elohim often lacks it, even though it's definite. Yeah, absolutely. So very often when and I think it is the general rule, when Hebrew words take it's not plural nouns. I think I have to look at Exodus 20 verse 2 now. But there are certainly rules within Hebrew with regards to various types of constructions and abstractions. They will take 20 verse 2, right? 20 verse 2.
Oh my God. So this thing, it's wild to me that there are people in the chat saying, well, Christians don't get their doctrine from Enoch, when Jude literally quotes from the book of Enoch.
Literally quotes it, guys. He does.
And it's the part about angels not being able to like intermingle with humans and like stars wandering around. Like, really just learn literally anything.
So Exodus 20 verse 2, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I think is what you're talking about. I am Yahweh your God. So this the definiteness of Elohim is, and Elohim's one of those words, right? It has nothing to do with the fact that it's a plural, but the definiteness of Elohim is usually implied. And the reason for that is because by the time the Hebrew texts were written, this word came to be the proper designation for God. Even though it's plural, it just came to be the proper designation for God, which is always definite. So that's what you're seeing there. What else? The other thing that you're seeing there is that when nouns take pronominal suffixes, as Elohim does there, it will also usually render the noun definite. But thank you for the fun technical Hebrew question.
I think somebody described it one time as the way that we think of scissors. It's a plural word, but it's a single item. And that it's like you don't have a scissor.
Yeah, that's true.
That's not a thing, so, and like you hear people sometimes will joke about pants. You have a leg, that's one pant, but that's not how we think about it. It's a plural word, but it's one item.
Yeah, I like that.
So yeah, that's kind of, if you wanted to use that, it's a little clunky, but
sure. And maybe another way to think about this as well is in Hebrew, body parts are very often, not always, but very often, most often, indicated by their dual. Your face in Hebrew is your panim.
Panim. Yeah, it's just
so it's and you have a face, but it's plural, right? And the reason for that, the way that it has been explained to me, the way I explain it to my students, is that it's properly dual because your body consists of two parts of everything, right?
Laterally symmetrical.
Yeah, it's symmetrical. Yeah. So, but yeah. All right, Hank Fishy. Wow, thanks for the $20 super chat. I really appreciate it. Okay, so what happens to Yahweh's share from the soldiers set apart for Yahweh, 1 out of every 500 people, cattle, donkeys, or sheep? Take this tribute from their half share, give to Eliezer the priest as the Lord's part. So this is from Numbers chapter 31. Sorry, I think it's Numbers chapter 31. And I think I see what you're putting down, Hengfashi, and this is my understanding of the text. The text does not say so explicitly. This is a story where I believe it's after the Israelites have conquered the Midianites. They've taken all the virgin girls back along with the livestock to and the rest of the wealth back to their camp. And Yahweh provides these instructions for the division of the plunder, which includes all of this stuff. Half of it goes to the army, the other half to the people. But then is it from both shares, or is it just from the one share? Yahweh also extracts his own portion. The natural way to read this text, because the text doesn't say explicitly what happens, but the natural way to read this text, I am convinced, and this is my opinion. There are some other ones, but I think I'm right here. The natural way to read this text is that these are given to Yahweh in the form of sacrifices. That's just, that's just how some of this stuff worked in the ancient world. But thank you very much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Dalai Lama. Wow. Dalai Lama's in the house.
He is very generous.
Eddie is very generous. No question. This was an awesome. I had a fun live stream today, guys, and I really appreciate everyone coming out. And I got a lot of stuff going on in my life right now, and this was a really big moment for me to kind of take my mind off some things and to enjoy hanging out with you, and to reviewing some scholarship, reviewing some silly pseudoscience, pseudo-history, and even a little bit of Christian apologetics. So hey,
you can tell which one gets me really frustrated.
Yeah, I get it. But wow. So listen, I can't read that. What does it say?
Vadim is saying, "Hey Kip, you and Apologia should have a Bible quoting competition." No offense, but my money's on Paul.
Dude, yeah. Maybe if we made the rules like quoting biblical texts in Hebrew or Aramaic, I might have a chance. But if they're English texts, no.
Paul's gonna win that one.
I can see, dude. I am not on that level. Paul, for people who don't know, Apologia was like a professional Bible quoter.
Yeah, he literally won competitions.
Yeah, he paid for. I think he said he paid for a year of college. Through this, but yeah. So, anything going on, Vishanti? I know what you're doing on Saturday.
Yeah, but too much to say. Like my personal life, it's been a rough year for me overall. But this was a nice, at least somewhat distraction from all of that. So
I'm sorry. This irritates you so much. I don't know what to do.
I've heard those arguments so many times, and having helped Josh edit parts of his book, it really made me familiar with the argumentation that people are trying to say, well, it wasn't that bad, or it was different because reasons, or it was temporary, and the pretzels that you need to bend yourself into. You don't have to think that this is moral. You can go, hey, that's old. We don't have to follow it. And to me, that's a much simpler explanation than going, everything is right, now I got to defend it. Do you really want to die on that hill? Morally, do you really? And just seeing the number of apologists that say, yes, actually, it's yikes.
Yeah, I know. I get it.
I want better for them.
Yeah.
I want better for them. So, because I think about people that I grew up with who are still Christians, and I'm like, I don't want them to have to feel like this is an obligatory position to take, because they wouldn't agree. So yeah, I just want better from that community. I want better for that community. So anyway.
So what's going on this week? Anything besides Saturday, or
I think I might end up mirroring our SBL debrief on my channel. Nice. I just didn't get to it this weekend. I had a seminar that I had to attend, and then I had stuff going on yesterday that I had to do first. So that'll be here coming up in the next couple days, hopefully.
Awesome. So guys, there's 239 people watching right now. All 239 of you. And whoever ends up watching this stream after the fact too, when Vish gets that uploaded, make sure you go watch that on her channel, okay?
Even if you already watched it on Kip's,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah, you have to watch it again, okay? And
sure,
yes,
get those watch hours up, I suppose.
Smash that like button.
Smash the like button.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Vishanti and I will be on with Dapper Dinosaur on Saturday at 11 Pacific. And we're talking about some sort of nonsense that that Bodhi Hodge wrote, I think, right?
Yeah, some pseudoscience gets kind of
yeah. But guys, honestly there's a lot going on here right now. Oh,
I know.
ISBL is in Australia in 2026, dude. Yeah. Maybe,
I'm gonna start taking sponsors to fly myself to Australia because I really want to visit all the folks down there that I've known for years. So
good to see you, Joel.
Yes, my channel, literally, you can just click on my name.
Yep.
But also, I guess I'll put a link in. That would probably be the nice thing to do, right?
So okay,
it's probably a lot easier.
Finishing up, I've got a bunch of stuff happening. So I have finished. I don't know if you noticed, but I have finished, edited, and uploaded the conversation that I had with Dr. Heath Durrell and my friend Dan McClellan, all about child sacrifice, responding to this lovely guy here,
Joel.
but that's on my Patreon right now. I'm going to be editing that and releasing it in 2 parts over the next several weeks, so keep your eyes open for that. But I think tomorrow's probably going to be a big day, because now Apologia has mentioned that this monster video that Josh and I made with him is supposed to be dropping. I can also announce that tomorrow the second installment of Josh's and my response to Inspiring Philosophy and Dr. David Falk is also, wait. I believe that is also dropping tomorrow. So you guys have nothing to do but watch YouTube tomorrow. Seriously. But yeah. All right. Thanks everyone for hanging out. I'm going to get out of here. Have a fantastic day there it is.